the terror and chaos of America's Civil War, a surprising revolution in higher education began. In 1862, Congress passed legislation called the Morrill Act. It granted each state public lands to help establish and endow, in the words of Vermont Congressman Justin Smith Morrill, colleges for the benefit of agriculture and mechanic arts. These institutions of higher learning came to be known as land-grant schools, and the Morrill Act was responsible for laying the foundation for public education through a national system of state colleges and universities. Its intent was to provide education to American children who could never hope to attend private schools. But in post-Civil War America, the system did not benefit all.
We were down here at 6 o'clock calling to order and went upstairs for a closed section for legal advice. And so we are now back to the regular agenda items. The first thing I will do is just point out a couple things for upcoming agendas. There's no additional items for this evening. But next Monday, the 26th, I'll point out that we've got 3 presentations scheduled, one from the Board of Elections, one on the Watershed Improvement Plan, and the third one on the Street Study and Resurfacing Plan. The following Monday, April 2nd, is Ward 3 night. And also, we have 2 work session items. One is a discussion of the sustainability contractor procurement, and the other one is a review of the strategic plan. The following Monday, April 9th, the city manager presents her proposed budget. And then Monday, April 16th, we have a public hearing on the proposed budget. And that starts, actually the 9th starts our work on the budget. The second hearing on the budget is Monday, April 30th, and that's both a constant yield tax rate hearing and the budget hearing. Then, just following up on the budget schedule, Monday, May 14th is the first reading of budget ordinances, and May 21st is second reading of the budget ordinances. And then the final 2 items I'll point out are items on Thursdays in May. Thursday, May 17th is the City Council tour of Tacoma Junction from 6:30 to 8:30. And Thursday, May 24th, is the City Council Tree Canopy Tour, again from 6:30 to 8:30. Both of those are on Thursday evenings in May. We will now move to the public comment period, and anybody who has any comments on items not on the agenda or any items that are actually any comments on anything except the resolution in special session. Now is the time to comment, and then we'll take comments on the resolution on the sidewalk policy in special session. And we have somebody eager to make public comment. Take it away.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present. My name is Bern Kelly. I live on Circle Avenue, Tacoma Park. Next to me with me is John Newsom, who lives on Poplar Avenue. And we both run small businesses like many people here in Tacoma Park. Some of you in front of us are those entrepreneurs. Recently we've been having problems with our vehicles, commercial vehicles, and I'm really here to propose that the council seek to develop a legislation that allows for grandfathered businesses that are operating continuously in Tacoma Park and have been to acquire a parking permit, a special sticker or something, and create areas for people with commercial vehicles such as yours, Mr. Mayor, and mine, Mr. Kelly, and John's, Mr. Newsom, in areas that are somewhat benign where there's adequate parking, of which we have ample down in the Pinecrest and Circle Woods areas. But anywhere, basically, where there's not abutters directly, or where the people in that area are in agreement that they have no problem with the parking. Recently, in this past year, after 23 years, I have been getting harassed by the police, and today they attempted to tow my trailer because it was not moved within 72 hours. And some of you may know Circle Avenue doesn't go through, and it's a sub-street, and down by John, half of Poplar, there is a undeveloped stream valley, and nobody lives on that side. So there's plenty of room to park in vehicles in a benign manner, but are actively used, but not continuously used on a daily basis. And I have been given 7 warnings this year. I have contacted Kay and I have contacted Bruce, and the police have continued to come down there, and today they towed my trailer. And I had to go sit on my trailer as they were trying to take it away to stop it from happening. And I called you up right away, Bruce, and asked for this police harassment to cease and desist. I asked for a ruling on the grandfather of my business from you guys over 3 months ago, actually last fall and before that. And we have not heard back. There's been nothing definitive, yet I am continuously having to move my trailer. But all the other commercial vehicles do not get harassed, and I don't want them to become harassed. I don't want them to have to move. We are the employers. We are the taxpayers. We are the creative self-starters that are part of the fabric of what makes this a progressive place. And when one person complains in a neighborhood and somehow seems to have in with the police, and I'm being targeted, I feel like I'm being harassed. And I really think that that needs to stop, and then to evolve is to create a place or a way to have a sticker and to find areas which are somewhat wide open and benign, and the people are in agreement that they should and could become areas for vehicles that don't have to be moved every 72 hours, but remain registered and maintained vehicles, and not just my trailer, because that's what it's come down to. And John's had recent problems, but we plow the streets when there's a problem. We help neighbors. We fix things. We go out and serve the city for no cost. We don't need to be. After 23 years, I can't believe I'm standing here asking for this to happen when I thought it happened when we went through annexation. But here we are.
And also, my name is John Newsom, and I have business on Poplar Avenue. 4th Avenue, there's a common area right there. I parked 2 of my trucks there, and we move them practically every day because we pick up equipment and things of a sort. When it snows, I take the vehicles off the street. I park them even in the neighbor's yard next door, but I've had several people complaining about my vehicles being parked in that common area, which is about the length for about 4 vehicles. Once I've moved my vehicles, it's barren. No one parks there, no one do anything. But once I park there, they've been calling the police, and they tell me I have to move them every day. And it's really a hassle. And like you said, coming up Poplar Avenue, cars are getting stuck constantly when it's snow. Get my plows or backhoe and move the stuff out for them so that they can come through clearly. No charge. Don't ask anyone for anything.
Okay. Thank you both very much, and we've got your letter, and we will take it under advisement and get back to you.
Okay, well, the police thing can't be a daily issue. It's become one.
Is there any way
My
we can put that on hold until...
Well, my sense is that the police are enforcing the law which is on the books, and if there's a complaint, they have to respond.
Well, then, I'm filing a complaint against the complainer and the police. Now, I'd like a response.
My understanding was that it was legal in Prince George's County to park commercial vehicles on the street in certain circumstances that Mr. Kelly and Mr. Newsom benefited from. And in the case of zoning, Montgomery County zoning code explicitly grandfathered Prince George's County properties for zoning permissions and so on, but I guess that didn't extend to parking rights and so on. But it is strange, as Mr. Kelly
the city
observes, to be
manager have
taking
any-
this up at this point.
Any clarification there?
My understanding, I need to refer to my notes, I was not with the city at the time of the annexation, but the grandfathering that Councilmember Grimes is referring to had to do with home occupation businesses. It had nothing to do with parking, and that was information I had gotten from Ms. Letlow.
Yeah, I haven't looked at code in a while.
Okay.
Yeah, she gave me some more detailed information, I just need to pull that together, and I will get that out to the council as well as to Mr. Kelly.
Right, and even if it's not grandfathered in, let's create legislation which
Right.
solves this problem.
Right, which is part of your request here.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my question at this point is, since this has been the situation that's gone on for years, and now, through the complaint and the enforcement, it's come to a head, is there any way that we can have a moratorium where we not take the aggressive police action at this time?
The council's not in a position to direct the actions of the police department, as the mayor indicated. It is a valid law on the books, and the police department, as I understand it, is responding to a complaint from one or more residents in that area.
We will,
Let me just add that I've spoken to the police chief about this in regard to commercial vehicles in my ward, number 6, and he said that the definition of what constitutes a commercial vehicle is, in the ordinance, is pretty vague. It's subject to a lot of interpretation, and he said once, he says, I don't even want to go there trying to figure it out. It's really too complicated to explain, so I think that that's another area that needs to be clarified as to what is a commercial vehicle in terms of what this ordinance is supposed to be about. I don't think there's anybody in this room that's going to be able to say what the definition is for sure.
If I could just add to that, I mean, if the grandfathering was done for businesses, it may be silent on the issue of parking, but presumably, the chicken and the egg go together. One doesn't assume that you're going to have the business in the house but not have the parking that goes with the building, the business that makes it viable. And so I would say, whether we need to seek, legal advice on that or otherwise get clarification, it just doesn't make sense to me that you would have one but not the other.
Again, if we create legislation, we create the rules within the municipality, then we can accommodate this problem, and we won't have to blindly say, accept what's going on. And that's what I'm asking you guys to go forward with. Thank you.
we will look at it.
Is this being televised right now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're a star.
And it'll be on the web for posterity.
My name is Mike Tabor. I'm a citizen activist. I've been a taxpayer and resident of Tacoma Park for 25 years. I'm here on behalf of a neighbor, a close neighbor, and a taxpayer in Tacoma Park who's being redeployed tomorrow to Afghanistan, starting tomorrow. And I'm representing Peace Action Montgomery and Maryland Coalition to Fund Our Communities, Bring the War Dollars Home, and I'm on the board of Progressive Neighbors. And I'm asking this council to join similar councils in Maryland throughout the country, specifically Greenbelt and Baltimore City Council, and pass a resolution asking for reconsideration of the prioritization of dollars being spent in a useless war. So I have, and costly war, so I have a resolution that I'll pass out. And I think most of you know about our two of our reps, Sheila Hickson and Jamie Raskin, who had a similar resolution passed in the Maryland General Assembly. And I have a second issue, which I've talked about, with Mayor Williams, but we've never done anything about it, and that is some consideration, perhaps a hearing of some sort, on a policy, a food policy, in regards to the obesity epidemic, the cost to our society, to our community, when it comes to the food venue served within Tacoma Park, when it comes to our street festivals and our fairs. That is the contributions in the way of some of the stands which are serving incredibly unhealthy foods to children, including, I know at the 4th of July parade last year, I saw fried Oreos and fried cookie dough and all this other stuff. I think Tacoma Park should be a better example for children and parents. So two possible resolutions. Let me hand these out. Any questions?
Yeah.
Good.
Have you discussed the food with the organizations that run the festivals, the 4th of July Festival, Street Festival, Folk Festival, and so on?
You know, I did bring it up several years ago, before there was this obvious obesity epidemic. And they were interested, they were sympathetic, but since then, it's really become much more of a major problem, and we're much more aware of it. I brought it up to the public schools when one of my sons went to Blair, and you saw, if any of you experienced it, that long corridor of junk food machines, which they've since eliminated, understanding that connection between junk foods, fast foods, and obesity and public health. Specifically this year, I've not brought it up, with the exception of talking to individuals and Mayor Williams.
I do note that the various festivals in Tacoma Park receive city grants to subsidize their operations, their ability to put on a festival.
Yeah. I know it would help, rather than myself and a few other public citizens, it would help if Tacoma Park adopted a strong resolution and a policy regarding the food venue at these events.
Thanks. Did you give us just one?
Everyone should have had one copy.
But it's just of one resolution.
Right. The
Okay,
second is a
okay.
consideration for you to discuss how
Right.
you'd like to deal with it. I'm happy to put together whatever you'd like, including background information or a resolution on the second issue.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing a second one if
No.
it was there.
No.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, City Manager, Clerk. I'm Dan Robinson. I live on Grant Avenue.
Nadine Block on Dietz. Mary Rooker, 804 Larch Ward 2.
And we're here to, we're not asking for a piece of legislation, and we're not asking for any specific act, but we are here to tell you that we're engaged in a exploratory committee for a credit union in Tacoma Park. And I have a little wrapper that I'm going to hand to you, and also just a few copies. I'm afraid we don't have enough copies for everyone, but of a survey a feasibility survey we're going to distribute and both in paper and electronically to gauge the potential for starting a credit union or finding a way to have credit union presence here in Tacoma Park. The exploratory committee is called the Azalea Credit Union Exploratory Committee, and it started with about 15 of us. There is a kind of a core group of 9 of us now, and in a couple of weeks we're going to meet with the membership coordinator of the Maryland D.C. Credit Union Association. We're learning as we go, and we're learning a great deal, and we hope that you can help us spread the word and help us engage citizens in our next efforts. Nadine or Mary, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
We have done quite a bit of research, and we have, I'll just say right up front, we have, the one thing that we know for sure is that the hippies will not run the bank, that we're going to actually have qualified banking people run the bank, despite our best intentions of putting in practice our principles that are behind the idea of bringing a credit union here. And also, we'll probably ask for some help from you all. Besides getting the word out, there may be an opportunity for maybe even a branch to open up somewhere locally, or an ATM for a credit union that would be placed somewhere within easy walking distance of people that are interested in also maybe going to the library, for example. So that kind of thing. We're not completely live yet. There is a website, but the survey will be both handwritten and also online. It's not online yet. So we do have, like we said, a short one-pager that we can give each of you, and 3 copies of the survey that we can pass on to the manager, and then you all can take a look at it and give us feedback.
And as soon as you get the website up, you'll let us know what it is.
Yep.
Yes.
I think it's actually, some of it's live already, I think. And we have a Facebook page that's also live, I think.
And there is a web, so I'll give these to you, and then we'll go from there. Look forward to, I hope you'll hear more very soon. Okay?
What was the website?
Say again?
What was the website address?
I think the website's going to be 2/sites-google.com/site-Tacoma Credit Union. But we'll have a bit.
It'll be improved.
It will be, don't worry, it will be improved.
To be approved, but it is listed on the back of our wrapper. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, that being the ex-banker that I am, is that there are no community banks in the Tacoma Park area. We have lots of branches here of banks that are famous. Everybody knows their brand name. But those are super regional and national brand banks, and there is no community bank. And a community bank is basically a small bank that, in terms of its geographic territory, is fairly confined. It's pretty much what you might think it is. And small banks tend to do small loans. Big banks tend to do big loans and have big customers. And so I would be really interested in and supportive of the idea of what you're trying to pursue.
We have pursued, looked into, done a lot of research, actually. I'm kind of tired. Community banks versus credit unions, our own credit union versus getting another small to medium-sized credit union, establishing a branch here. We're really doing our homework.
Good.
We've already done a lot, and we'll continue to do that.
Looking forward to more.
I just want to reassure you, this guy is not really retired, right?
Wait a minute.
And I think there's one more question, Councilmember.
Oh, good.
Have you guys talked to the Liberty Credit Union that partners with the co-op? Yeah.
Lafayette. We have talked to
Right, sorry.
Lafayette, and we've talked to Mid-Atlantic, and we're about to start a conversation with AFL-CIO.
Right.
And we got from the Maryland D.C. Credit Union Association a list of 40 or so credit unions.
Right.
That they have different realms, like who can be a
Right.
member and
Right.
a democratic institution, so you have to work through that kind of process. But thank you for that reference.
Cool.
And also, I mean, that's why we're doing this survey, actually. We're interested in seeing what kind of service people want. Do you want just an ATM, which is all that Lafayette has, or do you want a real live person, which is what some of us want? And what do we want to offer as perks for belonging to our credit union? How much do we want to take care of our community? Can we offer some kind of alternative to the predatory payday lending that happens in half of our community? Can we work out some way to offer the small business loans that people need locally? And what does all that look like specifically? Where's the boundary of that? And as some of you might know, there hasn't been a new credit union authorized in Maryland for more than 30 years. In fact, I have a feeling that that's actually a statistic nationally, because we know other people in other states, and it's similar. So we haven't done all that, because there's a lot of regulations set up to prevent community ownership of things like this. So that's another exploration piece that we're into.
Thank you.
Sounds interesting. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Thomas Nephew. I live on Birch Avenue in Ward 1. Last week, I brought a proposal for a resolution before you that urges the repeal of the NDAA indefinite detention provisions and calls for expiration of the authorization of use of military force on the end of combat in Afghanistan. And tonight, I brought some materials for you to examine. As you probably know, there's been some debate about the value of resolutions about subjects which aren't the traditional province of city councils, but our civil rights and civil liberties are, I think, one of the most fundamental issues of all. They're the rules we expect our government to adhere to. When faith is broken with those rules, when that covenant is broken, one way of life ends and another begins, and even municipalities soon feel the effect. To take a recent example, the actions of the New York Police Department in surveilling Muslim Americans without cause, a clear, egregious violation of the Fourth Amendment. It's just one example of how we're getting used to more and more brazen attacks on our Bill of Rights. If only the city of New York
had forbidden such actions in advance. However superfluous that might have seemed at the time, now it would have been a last line of defense of the Bill of Rights. And that's also what this resolution that I'm proposing does. For while it does simply urge some things like repealing the NDAA or indefinite detention provisions or asserting the expiration of the AUMF, it also instructs city agencies to decline requests by federal agencies acting under detention powers granted by the NDAA that could infringe on residents' rights. I think it's already right and proper for this or any city council to insist on giving advice when the federal government fails the Constitution. But this resolution does more. It promises our citizens, your constituents, that the city's own agencies will not be part of anything to do with the NDAA. We honor our men and women in uniform for protecting our freedoms. I think this can be our contribution. I think it's not just your right to pass this resolution. I think it's our duty. So I'm going to give you these materials, and thank you very much.
Thanks for the additional information.
Thank you, Mr. Nephew. I'll address a remark to you and to Mr. Tabor, which is that I would find it very helpful to know when people request that the Tacoma Park City Council take a stand on issues that are not normally or not focused on the city's jurisdiction, it would be helpful to me to know what degree of direct outreach individuals in the community have made to the cognizant levels of government. If it's a matter of weighing in on a federal matter, for instance, have a large number, whatever that might be, of individuals in the community done the right thing first, which is to express their views to the federal government, to congresspeople and senators, to the president, and so on. If people in the community are not moved to act directly to the people whom they elected and who report to them and who are responsible for these government operations, then that says that there isn't the degree of motivation one might hope for the city to act. Do you understand what I mean?
I understand what you mean. I guess I disagree.
It's a request that...
But I can see if I can find out how many, thousands of emails Chris Van Hollen or Barbara Mikulski or Ben Cardin have gotten on these various issues. But I would point out that however many it is, and I think it's probably substantial, the result has been nil. So I think that it's still our right to ask for a resolution. I think it's your right as a city council to exercise your First Amendment privileges as redress of grievances petitioning the government. So I understand your point, and I don't think that this is something that I would say should always happen every time, but I do think that when the failure is as bad as it has been with this bill, which did pass Congress, which was signed by the President, then this is part of how we are trying to respond, trying to enlist your support, the support of citizens. I'm gathering signatures. I'm doing what I can, and I think other people have been doing what they can all along, but it hasn't been enough. So that would be maybe a long-winded answer.
Okay, thanks. I want to keep going on citizen comment.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Keep my mouth shut from now on.
Hi, I'm Roz Grigsby. I'm Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. I wanted to invite you all to come to Art Hop this weekend. Art Hop is the event when the Old Tacoma area is transformed into an arts district. We have over 30 local artists, including one among your ranks, exhibiting in almost as many local businesses. We have performances scheduled at the gazebo all day Saturday, culminating with the Fire Dancers, Dance-A-Fire, local dance troupe that evening, and we have performers Sunday as well. It will be a wonderful event, and downtown definitely looks like spring, so I hope you will all come and help get the word out to your constituents as well. Thank you.
Look forward to it.
Hi, I'm Jen Wofford. I live on Carroll Avenue in Ward 3, and with me is Jaquette Frazier, who lives on Maple Avenue. And we are here just representing folks who want to speak in support of the World Festival idea. And the idea started, am I getting too much feedback?
You're fine. You're good.
The idea started back in January, and we appreciate Councilmember Ruben Snipper pushing these thoughts, and we very much appreciate the support that was expressed 2 weeks ago when you all met, really looking at the importance of multiracial, cross-cultural community building, so that we in Tacoma Park talk about diversity as something we care about, but don't actually invest deep, thoughtful resources in making that happen. And we're very excited about that occurring and that happening. And the way that we want to collaborate with the council and also with Jay Keller from the Rec Committee, and the Rec Committee is taking a lead in this idea, is to really do cross-cultural, multiracial community building events with single-day events that bring all of Tacoma Park together. So these are events about Tacoma Park, by Tacoma Park, and for Tacoma Park, very local, very homegrown. And I think the best example that many of you have been excited about, and we appreciate your excitement, came after we did the Martin Luther King Jr. Day event in January. And what we did that I think was so unique and different and exciting was that not only did we have a wonderful organizing committee that put it together and worked together beautifully well, but also rather than having outside performers from Virginia and D.C. or even Gaithersburg, the people who were on stage were only local Tacoma Park people. And there's something very moving and powerful about seeing our children from Piney Branch Elementary School and TPES up on stage, and their families there supporting them, really taking ownership of what the I Have a Dream speech means, for example. So that's what we did that really felt right and really resonated rather deeply with many people. So we have a fabulous group, about a dozen people who are ready to form an organizing committee, multiracial. We've got a great group, and we very much want to work with the council in having you all, however you want to do it, provide guidance, oversee the effort, appoint people, so we have an even better committee. And I'm being beeped at, so I think that's it. So thank you. And I'll stick around with Jay for a while, and Jaquette has something. Do you want to say anything?
No, I just would like to also, the day of service is so important, and people were very much involved, and I would like to see warm efforts from the people of our community.
Thank you both very much.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Lee Edmonds, and I was up here a couple of weeks ago, and I said concerning this smoking that's going on in my apartment, and I think the city manager said she was going to look into it, and I just wanted to know what the outcome of that, because I'm still paying to inhale somebody else's smoke. Now, I wouldn't have a problem with what they're doing in their own apartment if they were confined in the apartment, but it's coming into mine, and I'm inhaling this stuff, and it sticks with me in my nostrils. Everywhere I go, I can smell it. It never leaves, so I can imagine what it's doing to my lungs. And I don't smoke myself, and I don't appreciate paying to smell somebody else's smoke. So I wonder I just want to know what the outcome is.
Sir, I need to give you a call tomorrow. I did ask the Housing Department to check the county legislation, but I need to touch base with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move along to council comments. Councilmember Darius Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Where's Pat Lovelace tonight? Because we have so many people here who've come to speak in front of the council. It's pretty exciting from all different wards, and he's not here to at least hear it. And I'm hoping he's listening at home, because he's always so excited about having more and more people come to the council meeting. Real quick, I'm going to underline what Mayor Williams said. Ward 3 night is 2 weeks, count them, from tonight. And we're inviting not just Ward 3, but anybody else from any any of the other wards to come down and share some light refreshments with us at 7 o'clock in the atrium, and also celebrate. There's going to be a happy birthday month for one of the Ward 3 actual residents, so we'll have a birthday cake. It's a happy 70th birthday month, so it's a pretty major birthday. So we'll have a birthday cake and lots of light refreshments, and then from 7:30 to whenever the meeting is turned over to Ward 3, and come on down and say what you have to say. A lot of you were already here tonight to say what you have to say, so it's a good thing. There's got to be more. I'm also going to underline the Art Hop. What Roz Grisby had to say. There are 30 businesses participating in the Art Hop. This is the third annual Art Hop, and they run from Tacoma Junction to Tacoma, Old Tacoma, and up to Tacoma, D.C., and there are about 30 artists also participating. Each artist has a reception on Saturday or Sunday from 11 to 5, and you need to find out which one you'd like to go and see. I'm suggesting everyone start at the Junction at 12 noon at the Co-op, because I know when that artist reception is. It'll be from 12 to 2 at the Co-op. That would be mine. I do a little bit different kind of art. Most of the art is two-dimensional. It's framed pictures and sculptures and things like that. I do little miniature landscapes. And I also do silks that require no water. So, enough about me, on to Gold Stars. One of my constituents stopped me, I guess last week in the street and said, "Do you need any help figuring out who needs a Gold Star?" And I said, "Sure. Give me some help." And she suggested one of the most positive people that she ever does business with here in Tacoma Park. And what was most remarkable is I'd just seen the individual moments before, and I had experienced his warm smile and kind heart. It's our very own Phil Shapiro. He is a purveyor and official computer expert and self-proclaimed public geek of the Tacoma Park, Maryland Library. He surely lives up to one of his favorite quotes from Booker T. Washington: "If you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else." Among the many services he performs, he will take any computer that you want to discard, rehab it, and then he gives it to someone who needs a computer, and then he teaches them how to use it. His mentees range in age from elementary school children to people well into their senior adulthood. So I decided, just for fun, yesterday, I wasn't doing anything else, I decided to Google him. I'm going to tell you, it would take all night tonight and all night next week just to repeat all of the things that he's accomplished in his life. So I'm giving really, it's not just for the community of Tacoma Park, but it's for the state of Maryland and for the world. I'm giving huge Gold Stars to this gentle giant and Tacoma Park treasure. Next time you're feeling a little low, stop by the library, say hello to him, and he will lift you up. Thank you.
And is that 70th birthday person going to be a surprise?
They'll be very surprised.
Okay.
They're surprised that they've made it to 70 years.
Yeah, you don't look 70.
Other council comments?
It's not safe to surprise a 70-year-old.
I've got a couple things that I just wanted to give a little update on. I guess all six council members who were in town went to the Maryland Municipal League Montgomery chapter meeting last Thursday with the county council. It was interesting, and we talked with them about a number of issues, including tax duplication, and also got their feedback on how they felt the state legislation about maintenance of effort in schools was going to have a detrimental impact, potential detrimental impact on their budget. I also wanted to mention some events that are coming up that the Dance Exchange is doing. The director of the Dance Exchange is going to embark on a 500-mile hike that will be an investigation into the sources of our energy and looking into resource consumption in general. And there's going to be a documentary screening March 29th, Thursday, March 29th, in this room of The Last Mountain. And then she is going to take off from the Dance Exchange on Tuesday morning, April 10th, on this 500-mile hike where she'll end up in Beckley, West Virginia, where they're doing strip mining and taking off the top of the mountain. And then both Tuesday, April 3rd and Tuesday, April 10th, there are going to be excerpts from the work that she's working on, which is How to Lose a Mountain, and excerpts from that performance and a discussion first at the University of Maryland and then on the Millennium Stage at Kennedy Center. So this is the local dance exchange on Maple Avenue, and that should be an interesting set of events, and thought people would want to know about that. The other thing I wanted to do was just take a minute and share some of the comments that I got in response to my visit to the 4th and 5th graders on March 8th when I went to Rolling Terrace Elementary and spoke to 100 4th graders and 100 5th graders. I got a large envelope full of thank you letters from the students, and I just want to share a few of their comments with you and characterize what their interests were. And this is just excerpts from their probably, 50 letters. And they include, were you nervous meeting Governor O'Malley, and have you ever thought of being president? Why don't you have any security? And do you have a Facebook page? I wish you made more money for the things you do. I moved to Tacoma Park and wasn't sure about living here, but so far I love it in this wonderful city. I live near Flower Avenue and can't wait to see that project. I also go to the Tacoma Park Recreation Center, possibly right below your office. You're the first mayor I have seen in my lifetime. I'm delighted to know that you love to help Tacoma Park and the environment. If I know I have a problem or my family has a problem, I know you're a thoughtful person and I can tell you that we have a problem. Back to money again. I hope you make more money this year.
You seem to be bringing it up.
Well, there were a lot of comments about money, because they all wanted to know how much we make. With the money you get, can you give it to kids with disabilities, homeless people, and things like that? I hope I can help you if you can help others. And finally, I thought your speech was really extraordinary. When I grow up, I want to be an actress, but maybe I can be a mayor, too. And just to let you know their concerns, 12 of them mentioned the environment in general. 7 said that they hoped that I meet Obama. 6 said they really felt strongly that I should have my own security detail. 4 of them wanted to know about meeting the governor. 4 of them wanted to participate in cleaning up the creeks. 4 wanted to help clean up the bay. 4 said they'd like to visit me during my office hours, and 2 of them gave me their email addresses. So just a little flavor of what 4th and 5th graders at Rolling Terrace Elementary were thinking about when they got to meet and talk with the mayor. Are there any other council comments?
Can't top that.
We will move on to the city manager's comments.
Well, I'm feeling like Councilmember Siemens that you can't top that, so this will seem quite boring, but with that said, I just wanted to let the public know that there will be a community meeting here on Thursday night, which will be hosted by Metro to get feedback on ways that the F4 and F6 Metro bus routes can be improved. That meeting will be held in the Azalea Room between 6:30 and 8:30, and you can just show up anytime and offer whatever comments you have. On this Saturday, there will be a demonstration of a new diesel ride-on bus being considered for use in Tacoma Park on routes 18 and 25. You can come see the bus at 9 a.m. this Saturday in the rear parking lot, and then the bus will be driving down Maple Avenue and Houston Avenue, so you can either come to the parking lot if you have some interest in that. I know this has been a particular concern for some residents in Councilmember Grimes' ward, or you can just simply wait along either Houston or Maple and kind of watch it go past and see what you think about either the level of noise or how much it smells or doesn't smell. The deputy city manager will be on hand Saturday morning. People can either offer some comments to her either on Saturday or just send some comments to either her or to their council member later on. Tomorrow morning, the county council will be holding a work session discussion on the CIP request of Montgomery College. That request does include the proposed Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus math and science building, The county executive did not include funding for that project in the CIP that he submitted to the county council, but the education committee voted to add it in beginning in fiscal year 17. So any council member who has interest in that topic can either watch it online or we do not plan to offer any testimony at this time. The last thing, just to share with the council, and Suzanne may have gotten an email about this out to the council, the county council will be holding public hearings on the FY13 operating budget from April 10th to 12th, and the Government Operations, or GO Committee, as it's referred to, its work session on municipal tax duplication is scheduled for Thursday, April 19th at 9:30 in the morning.
And I'll be testifying on the budget on the, whatever that Tuesday is.
Yep. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions for the city manager? Okay, we have one set of minutes to adopt. People get the February 13th minutes.
I can move it.
Is there, all those in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, those are passed. A legislative update. I can just note that I testified on the transportation bills, SB 971 and HB 1302, and there's a lot happening in Annapolis. It's pretty fast and furious at this point, and there are going to be constant updates about what's happening on a number of bills, mostly having to do with the budget. It's about a 5-part process, and anything that I get, I will pass along, and I know the Deputy City Manager is doing the same. And if people didn't get a chance to read the MML bulletin that came today, it had an update on a lot of the bills. And if you're not getting that, make sure that we know so that you get on the right list to get that. So we will move to our special session item, which is a resolution adopting a policy for sidewalk requests and installations. And the Public Works Director is going to join us. We have the revised resolution that incorporates, I think, everything we talked about last week and an additional item or two, if you're going to go through that or point out the additional ones or however you're going to do it.
Yes, you'll see in here comments that hopefully reflect and accurately reflect the suggestions that were made at the last session. My thanks to the city clerk for formatting it and making it a little more organized and well laid out. In addition to that, it became apparent that we needed to identify the previous resolution that the city had passed that listed the tool design study as the format for which we were using to prioritize our projects, and so that includes the previous adopted resolution as well as language in the new resolution rescinding that and replacing it with this new resolution. So I think that's basically what you have in front of you, and we can...
And was there an additional item from Councilmember Mayle?
Yeah, and its language is reflected in here. Just
you just want to point out what that one is?
Sure. It's a clarification on clause number 2 on the second page, I believe, that says that when we're doing the survey of the affected area to evaluate whether a design is going to be done, the survey would occur both on the blocks affected by the sidewalk and a continuation of that street in either direction. That's the addition, or then the cross streets. So the language previously had not talked about surveying further in either direction from the sidewalk area in question.
And can somebody explain, is that just a formatting thing in there? It talks about, and the cross streets TDMI or TDM1?
Those are just my initials.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay. I wondered. Anything else that anybody needs to point out in the way of the changes from last week? Okay. Does somebody want to move this?
I'll move it. Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Schultz, seconded by Councilmember Snipper. Council comments, Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been a long process to get us to this point, and I have to say I still, especially after this last week and some of the emails that the council's received regarding at least one neighborhood association, I still feel that we should strike on the first page under number 1B, little I. I think it's inappropriate for us to be regularizing neighborhood associations with vague caveats that they are active and recognized, when neither active nor recognized are terms that are defined. We've seen this week that neighborhood associations do not always represent neighborhoods. They represent those people who are in control of the neighborhood association at any given point in time. And so I think it's very inappropriate to have that have the city code and this resolution and include them as an active player. So I would ask that we strike 1B, little I.
Any thoughts on that one? I'll say that in my, 19 years of dealing with neighborhood associations, my sense is that many of them provide a really valuable function in bringing differing opinions together and bringing valuable input to the city, and I don't necessarily want to cut them out of the process just because there may be a hiccup once in a while with a neighborhood association. I don't think that's a good reason to cut them out.
I certainly agree with you, Mayor, that they provide a very valuable function in the city. I just think to give them a role that makes them speak for an entire neighborhood when oftentimes the neighborhood association does not represent a significant percentage of the residents of the neighborhood, and when there are occasionally periods where the neighborhood association is in fact being run by people who are advocating for their own positions and not for the positions of the majority of those people who are members. And so you don't have all the members, all the residents of the neighborhood being members of the association, and even then, the association itself may be not representing all the members accurately. So I certainly think they should be part of the process. I don't think they should be at this level where they're actually making a request equivalent with a request from the city council.
Any other thoughts? Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
On that point.
That's absolutely what it's on. I wouldn't dare not to say something about that. I know that there have been some things going on this week, and I know that some of the citizens have also asked me to maybe have this struck. I think if you read the document, the first fail-safe that might control any other kind of control that a neighborhood association might have is the city perform a survey of the households in the affected area, and at least 50% of the responders provide a yes vote. All the neighborhood association is doing is making a request. And I agree with Mayor Williams. It's rare that there are terrible issues with the associations. For the most part, they're pretty much in alignment with what the citizens want. I'd like to see that stay in. And of course, I want 50% higher, but at least it is a fail-safe. It's definitely a fail-safe. There's a second fail-safe and a third one. There are three of them in the document. So at 50%.
And I would just ask, why not make it just a group of neighborhood residents rather than a neighborhood association.
Any further thoughts on that one?
I could add something. I thought about this as well. I frankly think that the role that neighborhood associations ultimately play in these kinds of issues where there's a certain amount of the possibility of inherent controversy is probably not going to make much difference one way or the other. You leave it in, and I think that all of us who sit on the city council and who've had occasions to be members of neighborhood associations or even run them or try to understand how hard it is to get people to turn out. And I think it's possible to make a case that neighborhood associations could only wish they could honestly come before us and say, we really do represent and really do know what our citizens want. On the other hand, I also think that they can play a vital role in the process to help gather people together, convene meetings in an organized sort of way, and have conduct civil sorts of meetings so that the citizenry can talk and ventilate about things and can disagree in a safe environment. But ultimately, the way this draft is put together is it's going to be a vote of the households in the affected area, and the citizens, the neighborhood association, really isn't going to have any consequential say in the whole process. So I think whether you leave it in or take it out is probably just not that material.
Any further thoughts before we see if we want to leave it in or take it out? Okay. How many people want to leave it in? And leave it, take it out.
Well,
okay, we're leaving it in. Excuse me. Where were we? Who had the floor?
I had the floor. I
Okay.
had one other thing, and I've mentioned it many times in the past, so I will only bring it up again just because it remains in here, and that is the reliance on the design tool. I'm trying to find it in here. I don't even see it now.
It's in the first whereas.
Okay. Anyways,
First page.
Talking about this one?
The tool design?
Talking about that one?
yes, there it is. All in blue, that's why I can't see it colorblind. Anyways, I again have said many times in the past, I feel that is flawed in that it is limited in the scope of the project that prepared that document. And so I, again, you're pointing to this resolution policy supersede the priority ranking.
Yes. So it went in so it could go out.
Okay, you've lost me. Could you please explain this to me so I don't have to object to it?
It references it as a previously passed directive of the City Council in resolution form, and then in that first, now therefore, it's saying that this current policy you have in front of you now will override and supersede the previously passed policy of the council.
Okay.
So it is, because it's established and out there and passed by resolution, it's a binding document that needs to be removed.
Unbound.
Yeah.
So this takes it out.
I got one that I didn't even know it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Councilmember Mayle.
Yeah, comment on some language that was added, I think, at the prior meeting that I'm not quite sure I understand. Under item 1, lowercase 2, Roman numeral 2, I'm sorry, B, residents request the initiation of sidewalk process via a request by residents of the affected area that the city perform a survey of the households in the affected area and at least 50% of the responders provide a yes vote. So my reading of that is that that's a process to get the city to hold a meeting That's what that part is for, is that correct?
Yes, that would be the initial way you can ask the city, we want you to start the process.
Okay, and so if I'm reading this language right, is it that the residents request the city perform a survey and that city gets 50%? Or is it that the residents are coming to the city with the results of a survey?
I think the assumption is that the city performs that same survey, the mailing, and we, make it a, what do you call it, neutral, and
Sure.
People can respond yes or no, and we're the only ones, we get that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just before we go any farther, I noticed we have the recurring issue that we had last week where we had duplicate sections. If people want to go to page 3 and fix the second H and fix them all so that go H-I-J-K to finish section 8B, or 8, whatever it is, section 8.
You are so good with the alphabet.
Yeah.
Did you get it right?
Councilmember Schultz.
I endorse this draft policy as it's been amended, and I want to say that I've thought long and hard about a lot of the input that we've gotten from citizens on this. Most of the input that I've listened to has been from people who have been eager to see the draft changed to either to a minor or sometimes to a substantial degree. I've had, for example, a long email discourse with Jack Carson, who lives in Ward 2, and is basically of the posture of being really, really concerned and somewhat opposed to the idea of sidewalks being built where he lives. And I think that's been a very intelligent kind of discourse that we've had. Joe Edgell and I have talked at length on some of the concerns that he's had, and I've listened to a ton of comments from Catherine Tunis, who's here tonight, and others raising issues that has forced probably all of us to think really long and hard. And one of the things that every time I've heard of a comment, I've thought, well, what can we say? How can we write this in such a way that will accommodate that concern or that fear or anxiety? And I've gotten to the point of realizing that for almost every case that I've heard, the inverse case can also be made just as strongly. For example, and I'll just make one example of this. This is the case is that suppose you have a continuous street and you have a block that has 2 houses on that block only. And those people, 2 people, happen to decide that they don't want to have a sidewalk in front of their house. And so that would mean then, in that case, we would sort of say, well, okay, no sidewalk on that block. So that would create a huge discontinuity on what otherwise would be a long, continuous run of sidewalk. Or the opposite, where you have a block where everybody in that block, 100% of the households would say, we really do want to have a sidewalk in front of our house in order to maintain or preserve continuity. And the residents of the so-called affected area, which is larger than the households in that one block, gather and say, well, notwithstanding what those people want, the majority of people in this greater neighborhood, the so-called affected area, don't agree, and so therefore there's not going to be a sidewalk. So I mean, it cuts both ways, and and I've come to the conclusion that there's no wordsmithing that can be drafted that's going to be able, at least not by humankind, to kind of address all of these kinds of possibilities. There's just too many combinations of situations that we're never going to be able to get the wording just right that will accommodate every possible situation that comes up in the future with regard to sidewalks. And so therefore, the conclusion that I've come to is that what ultimately we're all going to have to rely on the discretion and the judgment of the city council that happens to be sitting up here at that particular point in time, and the professional judgment of our staff, our city staff, which I think should not be at all minimized. To be able to make sensible decisions and to pay close attention and realize where situations need to be worked around because they don't quite fit into a mold that is an equitable situation, not only for the residents on whose property the sidewalk is going to be built, but also for the residents nearby who are going to use that sidewalk or who don't want a sidewalk in that area. And so that is why I think that I'm prepared to vote in favor of the draft pretty much as written, unless there's some clerical errors in here or something of that nature, because I think it's going to get us a long way. And also to ask residents to realize that we're not creating a Constitution of the United States here. This thing will be amendable, and experience as we apply, go through the process of trying to build sidewalks in the community where they're wanted, and there's many, many places in the whole city where residents are looking forward to it, just as there are some areas where they're not, that we may kind of end up coming back and sort of saying, okay, we need to amend the city's policy with regard to how we go about establishing and installing sidewalks. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So that's why I'm prepared to support this, basically, as written.
Councilmember Daniels' comment. Did you have something?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
You didn't
That was
raise me
leftover
for the
light.
last time.
Well, you can do that, too. Councilmember Snipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of brief comments. One is to note that this is a policy. It's not a law or regulation, so it can be changed easily if the council wishes. This gives us the ability to move quickly if the policy is not working in a particular situation. We don't have to have lengthy procedures to amend the policy. Second, I note that money for sidewalks is very limited, and so priority will be given necessarily to those that are of the highest priority and the most favorable situations. I trust that staff and council will respond to residents' concerns and not override their concerns except in very exceptional circumstances. And therefore, I support this.
And I'll just add that we have anguished over this for a long period of time, and I think the resulting resolution goes a long way to providing the staff with what they need to go forward and deal with requests from residents of the city who have particular issues about adding or not adding sidewalks, and I'm prepared to support this as well. I don't see any other council comments, so we'll go to public comment. Anybody like to comment on this resolution?
Cedar Avenue in Tacoma Park, and I don't want to beat my head against the wall. I appreciate the fact that you gave consideration, I hope, to the comments that you received from me and my neighbors on Birch Avenue. Did everyone receive those comments by email? Great, okay. I am obviously disappointed that there aren't greater protections, I think, for the people immediately affected. I appreciate the conflict there. If I were perhaps in your chair, I might err somewhat more on the side of the people I think are more immediately impacted, but I respect your view, and I understand that a balance has to be drawn. I do appreciate that it's going to be sent back to the immediately affected people after the review meeting, the design meeting, which is one of the far-along meetings. I think it's kind of a late gesture, and I'm sorry to say that I think what will happen there is that an argument against pulling back the project at that point will be that money's been spent on the design, and so therefore it's a bad time to stop the process. So that's sort of being built in, I think, to this policy as something that discourages those people I call the immediately affected people from having much voice, and I just want that to be clear that I think that's my view on that. I do think one way possibly to address it might be the view that Ms. Daniels-Cohen suggested, which would be to increase the approval percentages. But I was glad to see that Section 8B, you added the impervious, the concept that where you would build over onto the impervious road area, which I think is very desirable, preserves the green space. I have some questions about verification of people when they, you have these 50% votes. I mean, how do you know? Suddenly you're scrambling, going to meetings and trying to figure out, well, okay, let's see who is for this. How are we going to, move forward here? And I think people are a little bit in the dark in trying to figure out how to address the process as it comes up. I don't know as much as most people about the sidewalk issue, but I have read these last two resolutions very closely. And I must say that I am still a little bit confused about the question that you raised, Mr. Mayle, about, I gather 2 people can request a sidewalk under 1B, 2 lives. I gather it says residents. So I gather 2 people in the affected area can request it. And then at that point, Daryl's staff then they'll have that community meeting. And then they'll mail the survey, and then if they get 50% back, then it'll be a formal request. I mean, am I saying, is that right? Am I understanding that?
My read of this is there wouldn't be a meeting prior to that. Once the city received a request from a couple people, we would send a letter out to the affected area saying a sidewalk process has been requested for your neighborhood.
Okay.
Because it's only been requested by X number of people, we're surveying the affected area to determine if there's a majority of people that are interested in proceeding through this. And so we basically would be a cold vote.
Cold vote first up before the meeting.
Yeah.
I got you.
And let me just say, in terms of the vote, how we've done it so far, and I think it's worked pretty well, we send a letter to all the property addresses. We offer them the avenue of email response, voicemail response to the Public Works hotline, or a postcard that's included in the letter that they have to postage on.
Okay.
And each of those receipts, we print out a copy of the email. I handwrite a copy of the voicemail. There's no way to record that other than my reference of the date and the name.
Mm-hmm.
And the postcard, of course, is kept, as is the email, and we put it in a file, and that could be viewed by anybody who questions the process and wants to see it at any point. Those records would stay with the file of the project.
Okay. That helps. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, how are you? I'm Catherine Tunis. I'm probably going to run over my 3 minutes, so I might have to come back. And my comments, I think, this week may not be as organized as I was last week, so I'll try to organize them for you. There's some things about the new draft that I think are positive, and other things that I'm rather disappointed in. One thing I did want to comment on Councilmember Snicker's comment that there's limited money for sidewalks and that the higher priority ones would get the money first. That is not the way the policy is written. The policy is written so that first in, first out, and it does not give council the discretion to change that. You may want to consider that change. I do have to say that I agree with Councilmember Seaman's suggestion that the citizens associations are not an appropriate forum for arbitrating anything as contentious as whether or not we get sidewalks. I think there is a role for the citizens associations, and that is to facilitate a process to work with the city to ensure that everyone gets the notices that they're supposed to get, and that the notices that they've sent in are heard, that sort of thing, to help facilitate the discussion, to educate the citizens, and to ensure that all of the appropriate voices are heard. Because there are some people who just don't pay attention, and yet they may have a very strong opinion. And I think the Citizens Association may be in a position to know who those people are and to help make sure that their voices are heard. I was disappointed that in the change in the policy here, that those most affected by the sidewalk, where the sidewalk will be put, have been, those are the adjacent property owners, that they don't have a way to stop the process early on. And as a matter of fact, I'm very disappointed to see the change this week, and I apologize for being a little bit late last week. I did not hear Councilmember Grimes suggest that the affected area for the final construction vote should be the broader community up to a block away, including the cross streets. I think that is really inappropriate. It seems like a very perverse psychological experiment where you're asked to push the button and, you know, maybe it'll be something that causes a shock to your neighbors and maybe it won't be. But I think that that's an unfortunate change, and I hope that council will consider changing that. I'm sorry, I think I've lost my point. Oh, these things, basically I wanted to say, and Councilmember Schultz, you put so eloquently that these kinds of votes can go against the people who want sidewalks as well as the people who don't want sidewalks. So I think that's a problem. And I will stop right there and let other people talk and maybe come back. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Joe Edgell, 1001 Elm Avenue. I won't take my 3 minutes. I just wanted to extend a thanks to the council and particularly to the Public Works Director, Ms. Braithwaite, for making the changes to incorporate the TFEA recommendations. I think that makes this a substantially better policy. I understand it's just a policy, and obviously there are deviations that are allowed in special circumstances, and I think that's appropriate. But again, thanks for making those changes, and I think it's much better. And with that, I can't speak for the rest of the TFEA members, obviously, but I personally support this policy and its adoption. Thanks.
Thanks. Anybody else? Councilmember Siemens, you had something you wanted to...
Yeah, I was just going to suggest some language that might address the concerns of the people in the immediately affected residences. And on page 4 of 4, number 10, as part of the last sentence, the last sentence would start out, if greater than 50% of the immediately affected residences and then pick up with at least 50% of the responses receive the survey are positive, the city staff will request the design firm, et cetera, et cetera. And that would just get a little bit more weight to the immediately affected residences.
Say that one again. Just read all of Section 10.
Okay, Section 10, following the review meeting, the city will mail another survey to the households on the side of the street where the proposed sidewalk will be located, asking if they support the construction of the sidewalk as designed. If at least 50, never mind, I'm lost again, aren't I? This is just, I was thinking this was the section where we were doing the the adjoining streets.
We discussed that.
I see, we discussed that.
I thought we had actually agreed to do that. I didn't notice that until now, on number 10.
Yeah, I know that.
We did agree to do that. It should be written that after the review meeting, we're doing the construction survey, which is what number 10 is referring to. And so the survey should be mailed to the affected area, asking if they support construction. And then, right now, it says if at least 50% of the responses received to the survey are positive, the city staff will request a design firm to finalize. So that was just an error in our translating between versions, but you...
Well, I was trying to address the way that I thought it was written.
So how should number 10 read?
It should say, following the review meeting, the city will mail another survey to the households in the affected area instead of on the side of the street where the proposed sidewalk is to be located.
In the affected area.
That was original, and we changed it to in the affected area last Monday's meeting. So that's an error on our part of not including that. But
All right,
then,
so now my
and then-
change makes sense.
Yeah, Terry's...
Could you now reread your change?
Yeah. Yeah, with your revision and that revision.
So that the first sentence is talking about who's going to be surveyed during this time, which is the affected area, okay, which includes the section where the sidewalk is going to go, plus the side streets for 1 block, plus 1 block on either end of the sidewalked area. All right, so, and I'm saying that the next sentence should be, if greater than 50% of the immediately affected residents and at least 50% of the responses received by the survey are positive, the city staff will request the design firm to finalize the drawings to construction-ready documents. So I'm just saying that the immediately affected residents, you would have to have it greater than 50% of them agree to it, in addition to at least 50% of the...
So both 50% of the wider area and 50% of the people who were designed to have something in front of their house.
Right.
I prefer the language as it stands without that addition. We get scenarios like the one that Councilmember Schultz brought up of a discontinuity in a larger neighborhood where 1 block is out of tune with the rest of the neighborhood. We get the possibility of a street with 2 households on the block, again, discontinuity types of situations.
Any other council comments before I go back to get public comments?
Yeah, I have one comment. I would just say that change makes the bar, that change to me seems to be the highest bar of all. So
exactly.
So that's a change. That's of the 3 options, that would be the one I would least prefer.
Right.
3 options being just the affected households on the side of the street, or the affected neighborhood. Right. Those are the first 2 choices, and then this being another choice, you have to get a majority of both.
Okay, so given that we have a resolution on the table, you want to propose an amendment to add your language to number 10.
Second yet for that.
So do we have a second for that? Lacking a second, that fails. We have the change that the Public Works Director pointed out, that it should be the affected area instead of the side street. We'll say, is that a friendly amendment?
No, I would vote against that.
Okay. So
It can be revisited, but it was discussed and decided last week. Everything can be revisited, but this is a
technical amendment. I just want to be clear what language we're going forward with. So I'll say, if people want to raise a hand if they're happy with that change to what we thought we had decided last week, then we're clear on what we're doing. Okay. So people are good with that. So we now have, the only change to what we have printed is the language put forth by Ms. Braithwaite, changing the beginning of number 10 and the lettering. Okay. Now, yes.
Well, I'm not sure I have anything to say anymore, but I wish Councilman Member Siemens' motion had gotten a second. I think that setting a high bar for these kinds of projects ensures that when they do go through, you've got something that you know the community wants. Setting a low bar, by contrast, does less of that. So that'd be my only comment. The other thing I was going to point out, if that thing had gone through is that 10 and 12 go together, so that if you set a bar one way for the construction of a street, of a sidewalk, then you would want the same kind of rules set for the hiatus, but that may all be moot, so never mind.
But thanks for pointing that out.
support.
Continue. Go ahead.
I'm Priscilla Labovitz. I live on Birch Avenue, and I wonder if you would, if Darrell Brathwaite would reread what the change is going to be.
Sure.
The correction.
What I would suggest is that on number 10,
This is page 4, number 10.
page 4, number 10, at that first line of number 10, if you start at the word "on" and strike from "on" through the second line ending at "located," so you remove "on the side of the street where the proposed sidewalk is to be located," and instead insert "in the affected area."
Okay. Other comments?
I just have a question. My name is Kate Marks, and I live on Larch Avenue. And I've been a resident of Tacoma Park for almost 40 years. And I've seen a lot of changes, good things done in this city. This whole subject of sidewalks is frankly something I never thought would come up because, like I said, I've lived here 40 years, and there's something very aesthetically pleasing about our streets the way they are, mine anyway, and I just like it that way. But I wish somebody would explain to me on page 4, number 11, it says, if at least 50% of the responses do not support sidewalk construction, the city council may, by majority vote, decide to proceed with construction. Doesn't that make this whole thing moot? If the residents do or don't want it, and you have the ability to override the decision after all of the process, the voting, the public comment, I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
You're understanding it correctly.
Doesn't it make the whole process moot? I mean, why don't you guys just get together and decide whether you do or don't want the sidewalks? Why bother involving the residents? If you can override whatever the majority rule is.
I think it was put very well by, I think it was Councilmember Snipper who said that we want to get the residents' input to get the best result. There may be some point where we think there are overriding reasons to do something different, and we just wanted to make it clear that that could be the case. We don't anticipate that it will be.
May I agree with your point, or what I would point out in this section 11, this number 11, is that what I see is a sentence allowing you to override a decision not to have a sidewalk, but I don't see...
True.
I don't see language that would allow you to decide not to proceed with a sidewalk against the, despite what the preceding process had led to.
Which almost implies that you've decided already that you want it.
I mean, what I'm suggesting is add decide to proceed or not to proceed with construction.
Seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I want to make sure that...
With a decision-making body.
It's making explicit what I think is implicit, that the council can make ad hoc exceptions to what are otherwise stated policies. And this is let's call it a reciprocal exception for one that's already explicitly stated here. It's making one that isn't stated here explicit as well. Is that clear enough?
So, but if we want to make it equally explicit in
11 and 12 would talk about council, regardless of the, I guess it would say, not a matter of, it would say that the council may, by majority vote, override votes of the
Either way.
surveys.
Either way, right?
Yes.
We remove the do not support.
What if, and that's true on, road work and sideway, it's true on everything.
Yeah, it's just that we have this fresh document, so we have an opportunity to make it explicit here, where if we reconsider those other things, we could take care of it in those other places as well.
Can I also ask, there's a similar part in the design phase, would you want that changed as well?
Which number is that?
I wondered about that, too.
It would be number 6. And if I'm understanding it correctly, we would take out the if support from at least 50% part and just start it at, the city council may, by majority vote, decide to proceed or stop construction for 11, and for the 6, it would be decide to proceed or stop the design phase.
Somebody threw one suggested change there, which is, I worry that someone might interpret it all of a sudden, someone in the future could interpret it to say that the council now needs to get involved in every decision. So what if instead it just said, unless a majority vote of the council decides not to proceed, then...
To reverse the decision.
Right, unless the majority
community
votes not to. And then it's clear that staff are supposed to be just moving forward with whatever the neighborhood wishes, unless we proactively take a step to get involved. I think that's just a little bit cleaner.
I think that sounds good, and I think I'm hearing head nods. So if you want to restate that language.
Oh, my God.
So for number 6?
Number 6.
Sorry, let me go up to 6.
But either way, you all have the authority to override whatever the majority vote is.
Right.
That's correct.
Either way.
Either way.
So the alternative is, unless the city council by majority vote decides to override, or what the right language is?
Decide override the vote?
The vote.
On proceeding to the design phase.
Override the majority vote.
Override the majority vote. The project will proceed to the design phase.
And we could view that in two different ways. One is that unless you agree with us, we're going to do what we want to. Or it could be the view that you will always have the city council to fall back on if you disagree with the results of the survey.
I have another suggestion, and that is that given that these changes are not merely technical amendments, but go to the heart of what the policy is about, that another draft, and given that there was a mistake in this one, and much as I would like to see this resolved now also, and I'm not crazy about discussing sidewalks forever either, but perhaps there should be another draft and a final vote next week. Because I'm confused about what it says now. I'm hearing it all, but I'm not seeing it, and it makes it harder to understand what you're voting on.
I tend to agree.
Yes. Really?
Do we have language on 6 and 11 that's clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Unless the majority of the council decides to override the majority vote, the project will proceed to design. That's number 6. Number 11 is unless a majority vote of the council decide to override the majority vote of the neighborhood, the project proceeds to the construction phase. And it's the same language as in there now, it's just written a different way.
It's more simple.
But it's saying the same,
Easier to understand.
saying the same thing.
Is there a downside to postponing a week? I know that, you're kind of moving ahead anyways with the plans that we have out there, right?
Yeah, I just would like something else to do on Monday nights.
I'm in favor of approving it tonight.
As am I.
Okay. Just for clarity's sake.
I'd like to see another draft. I mean,
Read numbers.
Councilmember Daniels going.
Read numbers 6 and 11 again.
Okay. 6 would be, unless the council by a majority vote decides to override the neighborhood majority vote, the project will proceed to the design phase. And 11 is, unless by council vote of the majority decide to override the majority vote of the neighborhood, the project would proceed to the construction phase. Or if you want to say affected area instead of neighborhood, so we're using the same.
And that's just in number 11?
6 and 11.
With the
But there's
affected
10.
area
Yeah.
change?
But there's also 10 with the affected area change.
Yeah, that just is in the affected area instead of the side of the street, which was a decision made last week, so.
Okay. People want to proceed with this language? Okay.
No.
Show of hands, how many people want to proceed and finish this tonight? Okay. We're continuing, we'll take comments.
I do have to say that I really support this lady saying that you really should do another draft with more public comment, because you're changing things materially here that other people, it's going to affect their lives in a big way, and they have not had adequate notice, and they may have come and said that they either like it or don't like it. And I would strongly urge you to put it out there and send it forward. I think, listening to some of my neighbors talk, this whole process has been disconcerting for me, but I see it being disconcerting for other people, too. You're sitting there and you've discussed and decided before you've heard from us. And that just doesn't reflect well on you, and I really hope you would reconsider how you've been doing things. On the question of items number 6, as well as the one in the back, you have not done what the citizens asked you to do. What I would ask you to do as well is that it's not just changing the words around. What it is that the council, if they're going to be overriding any citizen votes, they should provide the option to override it for not constructing or for not planning as well as for planning and construction. That's the only fair thing to do, and whether you want sidewalks or not, it's good public policy to provide yourselves as many options as possible. You are now committing yourself to go forward with planning and to go forward with construction. You're not allowing yourself the option of backing off if your resources change or if situations change. You really need to provide yourself those options. That's just good public policy advice. On item 8C, I was pleased to see the additional language there for tree protection. I appreciate that. On item D, 8D, I think it would also be very easy for the Public Works Department to accommodate tree planting for trees that die 5 to 7 years after construction. That would allow us to maintain those large trees as much as possible and only replace them when necessary. So I would urge you to make that change as well. The first item, H, well, maybe not the first item, H, but there's a couple things here that require you to do, like I, or excuse me, it's J. Depending on the size of the new sidewalk, the city may need to apply for sediment and erosion control permit, and there's some other things. There are very, very few. I mean, I think it's nice to keep it in there, but quite frankly, that's not going beyond what is the minimum in the law, and there's going to be very few conditions in the city where you are going to be exceeding those things. On the second item, H, I think I would take out, if you are going to build a sidewalk, to take out those two words, or exceed, because there's no reason to exceed the minimum ADA if you are building a new sidewalk. The only cases where that would be needed would be on main streets, and I don't think that you have agreed to have the sidewalk policy cover requests for ADA retrofits or other repairs on main streets. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear you do that. And the reason I asked for this is because we really do need to minimize impervious surfaces. New construction is a permanent destruction of habitat, and so there's no need to destroy 1 square inch more than you need to. On I, paragraph I, we discussed this last time as well, and while in some places the citizens may prefer to have a grassy strip, have the sidewalk come further into the yard, and have a grassy strip between the sidewalk and the curb. In other areas, they do not, and we do not add an option there for citizen preference in the planning process. On item 9, I'm pleased to see beefed-up notice requirements, but I do want to notify the council that there have been a couple of reports in my neighborhood for a proposed sidewalk where people did not receive notices that thought they should have received them. And I think I looked at them on the map, and I'm not sure how they're defining these things, but it was at least one.
Yeah, Conway wasn't a street that was surveyed.
I'm sorry?
Conway wasn't a street that was surveyed.
Okay, but we surveyed the house on one corner of Conway, but not
That was
the other.
because it's effectively on Circle Avenue or on Belford Place.
Okay, well, I think that
It's a function of the house number. We tried to be inclusive of the street.
Okay, I think, and I don't mean to cast any aspersions at all on Public Works. I think they've tried very hard to be fair, but I think council needs to be aware that there's some differences of opinion about how that policy is applied or should be applied.
Anything else?
Item 10, I'm not happy with the current language that you guys are thinking about. I should have kept my mouth shut and left it as is. And on item 11, again, urge you to keep your options open. You're not always going to be flush with speed camera funds. And I think the city council, if they're going to maintain this option for themselves, one, it should be only in cases, they should build only in cases of demonstrated public safety requirements where it dictates the need for a sidewalk. And two, you should give yourself the option to not build the sidewalk. And on the final one, I'll get back to the comment that I made first about Reuben Snipper, that you have not given yourself the option of placing priorities on which sidewalks get built and which ones don't. And so I think perhaps you need to provide yourselves with a little bit more flexibility in that last one. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Mary Rooker again, Ward 2. Just two comments. I'll try to be very brief. I would like to plead again for you to consider raising the bar, as Ms. Daniels-Cohen was suggesting the other week. And actually, Mr. Grimes, it was your comment that reminded me of it. I support the resolution that Mr. Nephew was asking you to consider, and yet I thought it was eminently good sense, Mr. Grimes, your comment that, hey, have you gotten the numbers? Have you talked to people? Have you checked out and brought all the facts to bear and made sure? You're raising the bar before coming to the council with a request made really good sense to me. So I support both of you. And I thought it's ironic that here, where we're actually asking for expenditure of funds and something that has a serious impact on people's everyday lives, we're not having a very high bar. So I would encourage you to consider raising the bar. And I also want to just thank you so much for all the changes. I think this has been very good. I've been really enjoying the back and forth and give and take, even though I know it means a lot of edits and re-edits. And my final comment, as the process goes forward and you consider applications, whatever the policy ends up looking like, I hope that bicyclists won't be left out of the loop. My concern is that pedestrians are being taken care of nicely, but at the expense of bicyclists. I'm in favor of pedestrians. I like pedestrians. Some of my best friends are pedestrians. But some of my best friends are also bicyclists, and I know when I'm on a narrow street, I agree that it does slow drivers down, but most car drivers seem to expect me, the bicyclist, to get out of their way if there's really just one lane, basically two ways. And I really don't want to challenge them, because whether I get hit at 15 miles per hour on my bicycle or 30 or 25 really doesn't make a whole lot of difference for my estate, small as it is. Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
I'm sorry, you've heard me before. Yes, the bar should be raised. It should be at least 75%. 50% is way too low to make this kind of a permanent, intrusive change in people's lives.
Thanks. There's lights left on here. I don't know if there's comments that go with them. So,
That's a new light.
okay. Councilmember Schultz, then Simmons, and Daniels gone.
Well, I just want to remind everybody here in the audience that we're talking about policy, making a policy. We're not actually passing an ordinance that creates law. This is not like we're, changing the police department's role vis-a-vis immigration, or changing the speed limits, or dealing with marijuana or something like that. This is simply a policy that is intended to guide the city council and to help residents comprehend how the process is normally going to work with regard to the design and installation of sidewalks. And for that reason, even if the wording wasn't in here, the city council, in its capacity, always retains the right, this city council and all future city councils, to change the policy and to override votes by citizens with regard to implementation of a policy, even if it wasn't in here. So while people may sound a little surprised that we would reserve that right, that's inherent in any case that any city council has. And I would also want to help all of those who are concerned, and rightly concerned, as I might add, is that this works both ways, having the city council have the ability to step away from the policy as written, because it works then as a fail-safe for those folks who somehow or another feel that when the whole process finally gets said and done, the outcome is not equitable. And you will always know then that the city council has, as it always has and always will have, the ability to listen directly to citizens who say this is not an equitable solution. And so therefore, I think that it does provide opportunities right down to the very end of the whole process for the city council to override decisions that, in its humble opinion, as the representatives of the city elected, to come up with an equitable solution to a sidewalk situation. So just keep those concepts in mind. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to say that this resolution is not all that I hoped it would be. I think that from where we started out, I think we've made a lot of compromises along the way, and it's the whole sidewalk issue has been very divisive in the city. Excuse me. I think we have moved this along, and as has been said by Councilmember Schultz, it's not the last word, but it is a policy that can guide us as we move forward, and so I will support this.
Councilmember Daniels, comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Williams. I thought we were straw polling on 6 and 11 as to say yes or no. It's a up or a down vote as to whether, I didn't realize it was the same languaging, just the words changed around a little bit. Second, I'm going to poll for, or whatever, rally for having, I know Ms. Braithwaite doesn't want to spend another Monday night, but rewriting it in exactly the language that it's going to be passed in, and let's give it another eyeball, take it another look. And again, I'm going to plea for everyone to reconsider at least raising the bar in the first fail-safe, having it be, I compromised already down to 60%, from 66%. So just in the first fail-safe, making that bar a little bit higher there, if not in the next two, that's what I call the next two areas, because at that point, we haven't spent any money necessarily, not big money. There hasn't been a design group in to show the residents how the sidewalk's going to look. It's some money because there's some staff time and postage and taking care of responses. So that's it for me. Thank you.
I would second that request.
Which one?
Raising it to 60%.
Anybody want to speak to that one?
Yes, we've heard from several of my constituents in Ward 1 here tonight. I'd like to read excerpts from email messages that I've received from other constituents. I'm not going to give their names because they didn't send these publicly. I've been watching the sidewalk debates from the sidelines for a while now. I think the policy is balanced and fine, but I also believe that Tacoma Park needs to recognize that these are not country roads anymore. For the safety of our residents, we ultimately need sidewalks on all our roads. That's one of them. Bear with me. Here's another. I think that would be sidewalks, are important to promote walking. They are needed for safety. Not every road in Tacoma needs sidewalks, or at least perhaps the small streets on one side only. I'm sure I just started a war. Well, he hasn't been watching closely enough.
The war is well underway.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Sidewalks separate traffic participants to keep the weaker part, the pedestrian, safe from moving vehicles. Yes, the traffic danger could be lowered if drivers could be persuaded to a safe speed and to avoidance of distracting devices like cell phones, but this is not the case. Furthermore, one should consider whom sidewalks are protecting, pedestrians in general, and among them children, perhaps walking to school, so on and so forth. And he also mentions being a senior. And there was one other that I will look at here. Let's see. I read the draft resolution. It seems fine for the most part, but I wonder whether you could ever get 50% of the residents to agree to move forward, skipping a bit. I think the existing resolution, and he was operating from the 50%, I think the existing resolution is designed to keep anything from happening. So I have concluded that there are divisions in the community. There are people who have not come out because they have seen in front of them on the web a resolution that seems to them fair and balanced that they're ready to go forward with. I think we're hearing from opponents who wish to see the bar raised here tonight. We are not hearing from the proponents. This happens in meetings, in my experience, very frequently in Tacoma Park, where people are reactive. People who supported what was put out on the web are not here tonight, is my conclusion. I have heard from them. I've actively gone out and polled them. I believe that 50% is a fair and balanced threshold, and I think that it is one that is workable in the community, and I oppose changing it.
Any other comments on the amendment that has been moved and seconded to lower it from 50 to 33?
Thank you.
No, sorry, raise it from 50 to 60.
Right.
Go in the wrong direction.
In the first fail-safe.
Yes, in the first section, which is
Item number, I think, two little eyes.
top of page 2.
Yes, little eyes.
All those in favor of that amendment, raise a hand. Opposed? Okay, that amendment's rejected. You finished with your comments?
Yeah, let's see. I ask us to reconsider voting on it tonight so we can actually see the document as we're going to vote. I may be stepping on toes, but I'd like to see it written the way we're going to vote for it. That's just me.
Let me just say for a moment, I was tempted to go there as well, but then when I realized that it was just taking the language in number 6 and 11 and kind of flipping it.
But I thought I was voting for an up or a down vote in number 6 and 11, and that's not the way it's stated, is it, Ms. Braithwaite? It's just it's an override. It's not whether or not.
That's right, it's a straight override.
It's a straight override on the residents wanting to go forward, not one if they want to.
Either way.
No, it's either way. It is either way.
Yeah.
I didn't listen in.
Unless
Okay.
the city council, by majority vote, decide to override the majority vote of the affected area, so that majority vote could be
Either way.
Okay, all right. I didn't hear that part.
Okay. Councilmember Mayo.
I just want to thank city staff in particular for all your work on this. I also want to thank you for the ongoing processes that are playing out right now in Ward 2, where we've had great participation in public meetings, very, very civil discourse between people who want and don't want sidewalks, people who are interested in modifications, for example, having a sidewalk in the street bed or sidewalk widths, tree considerations, and those have been great processes so far. We've gotten exceptional participation, I think, in the surveys we've done of whether people want to do a design, with very strong support, at least in 2 out of 2 cases, of people wanting to do designs. And at least we've talked to those residents, those neighborhoods about, once we have a design, really working with them about the aspects of the design, trying to make sure we get the design right, everything from the side of the street to, as I just said, considerations of where walls would be relocated, tree considerations in the street bed, out of the street bed. And so, I think these people with firsthand experience of this process, pretty similar to what we've got now, are having a very good experience. And so I'm really looking forward to having this finalized by vote, I hope, tonight, and being able to give even more certainty to those people now who are operating under sort of a little bit of a what-if in terms of what's next as we move from design to potentially voting on construction. Thank you.
Okay. What I'd like to do before we vote is to just make sure that we have all of the changes agreed to, and I want to kind of double check with the clerk just to make sure that what I think is the list is what you have. And that is on page 2, item number 6, the flipping the language. On page 3, the re-lettering of the last 3 lettered items in number 8 at the bottom of the page. And on page 4, the amended language back to what we had decided on last week, where it's the affected area, and the same flipping in number 11 as in number 6, to make it clearer, and that it's affecting the majority. It's a majority vote of the council overriding majority vote either way. Okay. And is that everything you had? Okay. So that's the 4 minor changes. All those in favor of this resolution as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much.
First agenda item.
And given that we have some folks here for the first work session item, we will do that before we take our break.
Do we want to give them time to wake up?
Well, then go. And this is a discussion of the proposal for the World Festival and other one-day events in the city. And the council members have disappeared.
They haven't gone over the hands round.
We still have quorum.
Yes, we do.
Still a quorum.
Yes, we do.
Let's go.
And
Let's go.
we'll go. Let me just
Maybe it would be
get to that
appropriate if we have Ms. Wolford and...
Well, yeah, yeah.
Well, I was going to say have them introduce it.
It was, let me just say that this item came up because Councilmember Snipper and others wanted to give some direction to the city manager on potentially including some money in her proposed budget.
Right.
Well, she's going to make sure that they get back out here.
Either that or she also is leaving.
Either that or all the principals have left, you can leave too. So...
You need a bailiff.
So...
Sergeant.
This is here so that we can understand what might be involved, so that we can understand what a potential budget impact might be, and with that, maybe it's a good idea to have Ms. Wofford and Mr. Keller say a few words, if you wish, about the intent of the effort, so that we have a context for what we need to do to give direction to the city manager.
Well, you have before you the proposal that Jen put together and that the Recreation Committee and others that did the MLK Day kind of formulated, along with kind of a bare bones budget on things, versus the city budget that I think Greg put together at Barb's direction that has everything plus the kitchen sink thrown into it. And it was really our intention in the World Festival to have something that was very much driven by the citizens, very much participation by the citizens. As Jen said earlier, the idea was, to have local musicians, to have arts and craft that's driven by local folks involved in this, that didn't have, I think, as the kind of city-driven budget, has a lot of imported talent brought into the city. And I think one of the amazing things about the group that's working on this is we get about 12 to 15 people from fairly diverse elements. I think we've got somebody from every ward in the city involved in the process. And it was, I think, somewhat designed to take advantage of the enthusiasm and the excitement and energy that came out of the MLK planning. I think what's different from other city events, the street festival and the music festivals that we have, is that they're all great events and we are very supportive of those things, but this was meant to be much more of an event that was driven by local involvement and local volunteers. So our sense on this in terms of budget was that most of the work would be done by volunteers, and that for things that we could not do, such as sign vendor contracts, do insurance to cover the event, get the permits for the location, that those would be functions of the city staff. And, to some degree, since this is the first time we've envisioned doing a World Festival, the thought was to do it in 2013, and to see how it goes, to build upon this. And as an adjunct to the World Festival, we are working on plans for almost monthly events to raise awareness about the World Festival, to link in with other pre-existing city events, the 5K run, the street festival, the jazz festival, things like that, where we would advertise and kind of build excitement around the World Festival. But again, in looking at the two budgets you've got in front of you, we are looking at a much more conservative budget in terms of the committee, with a lot more volunteer input. And certainly we welcome staff involvement, but that is not something that we're looking to rely upon to have, hundreds of staff members at the event and doing all the work. That is something what we really want to involve citizen participation.
Beautifully said. The only thing I would just add is that one of the most amazing things about Tacoma Park is that because it's so close to D.C. and our metro stop is in the District of Columbia, that you get people who move to Washington for these big Washington jobs, politics, campaigns, and they happen to settle in Tacoma Park because it's Montgomery County Public Schools, and it's super close to the district, and it works well. And it has a social justice feel. People come to Tacoma Park because of a sense of social justice. So the thing that I think the city staff may not have as much interaction with is who your folks actually are who happen to live here. You happen to have amazing people who happen to live in Tacoma Park and have unbelievable skills and ability, right? Like if you want to see huge events, like the same way Councilmember Tim Mayle is a leader in the national environmental world, so, and he just happens to be in Tacoma Park, and right, but he knows the national environmental world. Well, there are lots of us, if you want to see events, you know, events for the president, you've got them living right here in Tacoma Park, so just let us do them. We'll do them for you. That's what I would say. That's why we really do not need to hire in outside talent.
Okay. One thing that I thought might be helpful would be if the city manager could just take a minute and explain as best you can in the administration area of the budget that staff put together, or, you know, recreation director or whoever. Because I recall some discussions that various festivals have had about liability insurance and maybe also the contracts with craft and food vendors, and I wanted to make sure that we understood how that can work or has to work.
Is there a written policy?
What I'm looking for is, my recollection is that for the city providing liability insurance, that it has to be that the city is basically in charge of the event, otherwise it can't go on that policy.
That is correct. Events that are not under the specific terminology that would be used in insurance circles is that the event has to be under city direction. So what I believe you're recalling, Mayor, is for things such as the Independence Day Festival. That is actually not organized by the city. We're simply there providing, police traffic control, things of that nature. So the event would not be considered under city direction, and therefore it cannot be under the city's liability insurance. The only activities, for example, using the 4th of July example, once again, that would be covered is something involving our own city staff and work they are performing on the city payroll.
And that's how that liability insurance works.
That's correct, and it would be the same thing. The street festival organizers have to get their own liability insurance. The folk festival organizers have to get their own insurance.
Okay. And the contracts with craft and food vendors, is there any similar, how does that work?
I guess it would depend on how the event is structured. I'm not sure specifically, Mayor, that I understand your question. For all the festivals that are currently held in the city staff is not involved with any of the craft vendors, so it would not be something that we would have any experience with, or the food vendors, for that matter. Mr. Clark may have some knowledge just from his past experience with park and planning, but no one else, I believe, on the city staff probably has the experience with those activities.
In my previous experience with park and planning, the contractors or the vendors actually had to present insurance certificates, whether it be and other permits, to include food handling permits, a permit to a vendor's license to actually vend at the event as well. So that was a part of the packet that we requested back in from each vendor, whether it be a food vendor, craft vendor, or what have you.
So they had to supply all of their own stuff?
Because the park and planning, similar to the city of Tacoma Park, is self-insured, so we didn't provide insurance for these events, or we didn't get insurance for these events.
But there is some overarching liability insurance for kind of the event and the participants?
Yes, I just want to clarify. We are not self-insured, but the language that the policy that I just mentioned is specifically coming from the insurance pool that we belong to. They will not cover outside activities. Oftentimes, if you have vendors doing things on city property, besides just the general liability insurance that the overall event organizers would be responsible for providing, you may ask vendors to list the city as an additional insured, just as additional protection. That would be something we'd have to check with our insurance company with. Like I say, it has not been our experience as a city staff.
Councilmember Siemens, did you have something to add in this area?
Yeah, as many of you know, I've been involved with the Independence Day celebration for several years, and just this year we again have been talking about the insurance needs, and I think that we've talked about this World Festival as being a little different than anything we've had here in Tacoma Park before, and we talked about wanting to have the recreation department more involved in it. But I'm wondering if for this first year of the World Festival, as we stick our toe in the water, kind of, if it might not be a good idea to model it after the Independence Day celebration, where it is a community-led event, but has, as Eric Rausch has done with us, been very helpful with the Independence Day planning, and yet the actual selection and contracting with the vendors is done by the Independence Day Committee. The insurance coverage is contracted for and paid by the Independence Day Committee, and certainly it's a hurdle to get over to raise the funds to do that. But we do receive some of the funding from the city of Tacoma Park, and it's maybe a way of doing this festival that helps us to meet our goals and desires. And I think the goals is one thing that hopefully we can talk about tonight if we get through some of the how to put it together, but what is it we're really trying to accomplish. Anyways, I would just suggest that maybe that might be a way that meets some of these, gets us over some of these early hurdles. And as we look forward then beyond the first year, there might be a better way to structure it, not just for the World Festival, but also for some of the other, one-day events in the city.
I guess one of the questions I have is, it seems like kind of a flexible area of the city operating the whole World Festival versus a partnership with local citizens on that, and is there a formula where it has to be, 75% of the people running the festival have to be staff, or if Greg showed up for the World Festival and we did stuff through him, does that meet the standard? I'm just wondering at what point do you have to have complete direction by city staff versus lots of input in the process by the citizens. I mean, part of this was we wanted this to be a process where we got a citizen group together and we kind of pooled efforts from the citizens to really get involved, to do stuff, to take responsibility for, craft booths and stuff like that.
But the other piece of it was that we wanted it to be certainly hand in hand with the recreation department, so that the community, learns more about the recreation department, and the recreation staff get to learn more about the community too.
Right. But it seemed to me, in looking at the budget that's in from the city tonight, that is a vastly larger, completely different from what the committee that kind of formed in this, completely different from what we envisioned a World Festival to be. That it was not a Tacoma Park World Festival at all. It was almost a Disneyland festival. And so that was my concern. When I saw this last night, when I was looking at the agenda for today, I was like, well, this isn't...
Well, you're saying Disneyland because it includes a lot of vendors from outside the city.
It's
and
vendors from
contractors.
outside, it's prizes from China, it's
Entertainers.
It's entertainers from outside the area. I just... I think we really, as a group, envision this of, like, going to House of Musical Traditions, working with folks of, like, what are some local musicians we can do. I mean, we've been talking about this as being, a day to maybe a three-quarter of a day event this first year, not mega, mega, mega. And the budget, to me, strikes me as being a mega budget. I think there were 6 people doing the TV work for the day, and
Well, and I think that's good. I mean, I do like the TV coverage. I think what I would like to suggest for tonight's discussion, and rather than drag this on forever, is that, Greg, you put together, a plan in a relatively short amount of time without a whole lot of discussions about this, and I know that, Jen, you put together something rather rapidly. I would like to just suggest that what we're looking for tonight is to say, let's include this in the budget at some level, okay, and not figure out exactly now how that money gets spent, but the fact that we want the group and the Recreation Department to sit down and come up with a plan on how to do it, and that maybe tonight we just talk about, how much money do we want to feel comfortable putting in the budget, and kind of what kind of goals might we want to meet with this thing.
I mean, I guess the biggest question we had was, what's the division of responsibilities between the volunteer group and the city staff? And, I mean, our intention was to make it as low impact on the city staff as possible, and making sure that the city got lots of credit for this while bringing in lots of citizens.
And I'd just like to ask the city manager if there's anything that you'd like to say that would help define that area where it's kind of the difficulties of that interaction of volunteers and city staff, and kind of some of the parameters of what would have to be figured out to make it clear and to work.
I had some other comments, if I could make those first.
Sure.
One thing I would say is the staffing costs came directly from those departments, and I think are very reflective of what we spend on other festivals of a similar time frame that is being discussed. So I think at a minimum, if you're going to budget something, you should be looking at $10,000. The one thing I will say that is not in the budget that I noticed, and I apologize, Greg, I didn't notice this before, is particularly if there is a desire for housing and community development, and specifically this would be Sarah Danes, to be doing extensive work on sometimes of an art exhibit. I think the council is well aware of my concern about making sure Sarah can actually focus on her director duties, which is not what is currently happening. Then I would probably ask that some funding be included, and I think she may have sent that information to me, and I may have neglected to give it to Greg, to actually hire someone to assist her specifically for this event, because I just don't see any way that Sarah can take it on. In regard to Jay's question about liability insurance, I would have to check, but the standard of the city directing an event is not just a city staff person sort of being on hand to ask questions. That does not rise to the threshold of the city direction of an event. And I don't know if that's 75 or 25%, but what they're looking for is that essentially the event is under city control. It is city directed, and that's the term that the insurance company has used with me in past discussions about this issue.
That's why I think the model of the Independence Day
exactly.
works a little better, because I think the desire is not to have it.
Correct, and that would be clear that it is not a city-directed event other than the employees who are staffing it. I think, Mayor, the only thing I would add, and I did mention this I think a couple weeks ago, certainly there can be some flexibility in terms of how things evolve, but we do have a responsibility as an organization to basically have staff work plans in place, and an event such as this is not a small undertaking. At least as initially presented, there is extensive work that would be done by city staff, and we have a contractual commitment to our collective bargaining units to have any work that is being expected of an employee and that for which they will be held accountable to be spelled out in those work plans. So this is not something that can take 6 months to evolve, and then suddenly, particularly Mr. Clark, is assigning work to an employee. That would be problematic from a compliance standpoint with our unions.
So let me understand that then. If we were to put together a work plan, when would it have to be in place? How far in advance of the event?
Our work plans are basically contractually obligated to be in place a year before the employee will be evaluated. So if you're talking about an employee who will have primary responsibility for organizing this event, which I gather may take place in May, or May or June.
Or the first.
And those work plans would need to be developed within the next 60 days, basically, 60 to 90 days.
That's if they're going to be organizing the event, but if it runs more like the Independence Day,
Yeah, I think if it's a matter of police officers that are assigned to do traffic control, that's just a regular assignment. That's not something that would be in a work plan. If it's a matter of sanitation guys coming and emptying trash cans, that's not a work plan item. But if there is a primary role to be played, or even a semi-primary role to be played by the Recreation Department and members of Mr. Clark's staff, that should be defined much sooner rather than later.
okay. But Mr. Clark is a high-paid director, and so he doesn't have to worry about those work plans, right?
I would have to worry about his work plan, but in my discussions with him, I can see that some of this work may flow to employees who are in the collective bargaining unit.
Okay, thank you.
And a quick question I had on some of the staff costs, the kind of in-kind stuff. Is that something that is usually that kind of, we know internally what that is, but does it usually get assigned or specified in terms of festivals or those kinds of things where the city does things, the street festival, the folk festival, for Independence Day, where those costs are definable and kind of assignable to that event? Or is it just, that's just one of those costs of city staff time, and it's acknowledged that it's there, but it's not really broken down?
The part that is not overtime does not represent staff overtime on the day of the event. Basically, what it does is it just takes the place of other work that the staff would be working on. I know.
So the direct costs that are labeled tend to be the overtime day of the event?
That's correct.
Okay. That's helpful to understand. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for the thoughts, the comments. One thing I wanted to be clear about is that, and we've had these conversations before, but just to bring it back to the surface. So Tacoma Park is an amazing community, and it has a really rich, multiracial, diverse population. And yet there is no official city committee looking at how to maintain and enhance those connections in any way, shape, or form. So we all care about diversity, but there isn't actually any official investment in that. And so we are not talking about, I don't think we're interested in another festival for the sake of fun music and food brought in from outside. I don't think that's at all what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, are we going to invest in cross-cultural, multiracial community building, which we should be doing if we're going to have a successful community in Tacoma Park ongoing, and if we're going to do that, I think the city council gets to shape that. You get to say, here's what we want to see, go do it. I think it's not just like, let's have another fun music festival. I think it's a different thing entirely than the 4th of July, which is fun.
Yeah, and I didn't mean it was like 4th of July, only in that the structure of the interaction with the city was similar to the 4th of July.
And I want to make sure that other council colleagues get a chance to say something. Some lights have been lit for a while. I just want to remind us that all we're really trying to do at this point is not create all the parameters on this festival, but to give some direction to the city manager about what to include in her proposed budget. Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
I guess I read, thank you, Mayor Williams. I read Gregory Clark's budget, and I think I wrote, yikes, at the top of the page, because based on my conversations and my listening of the, I'm going to call it an ad hoc committee for lack of anything else, the budgetary, excluding Public Works and Police, because I'm sure that's around, those figures are real, $10,000 is a real number. It seemed like a pretty reasonable and hand-hewn kind of a world festival, and exactly what you wanted it to be, utilizing a lot of volunteers, people coming, giving of their time and things like that. I thought this was really, both are well put together. Gregory's is also excellent, and maybe, maybe where you want to take this, aside from bringing outside people in. but I was really thrilled with seeing what you'd written down. Here's what I know, and I could be wrong, but I was involved with the City of Laurel for over 10 years. They run 3 of these kinds of festivals a year using the city and volunteers. The 4th of July happens to be one of them. Main Street Festival is another one, and the third one is the Holiday Festival, which is they do it exactly with all volunteer committees, but there's also city staff very involved, police, public works on the committee. So that's just food for thought and a place we might be able to get a few ideas. I, as you well know, I went through and marked down every month and marked down all the festivals that I could think of today. I didn't have anything else to do. I've got about 11 of them, and there's one almost every month. And 3 of them are specifically city-sponsored ones. The Easter egg hunt is a big one, and that's a Recreation Department. In May is the 5K Safe Road run. That's also a city-sponsored one. And the third one is National Night Out. All 3 of those are sponsored by a different city department. The rest of them are either sponsored by volunteers, and the major ones are volunteers or other, like Old Tacoma Business Association or Historic Tacoma, other groups, plus your ad hoc group for Martin Luther King Day. So I really want to see us go forward. I'm with all of you all. We speak diversity. We say we are diverse city. I don't see it. I mean, we're talking it, but we're not walking it. And this is just could be a culmination of all of that. And find out. I mean, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. It's just the way it is. All of us do it that way. So, and I'm not sure we all realize that. So I want to see how we can go forward and make this actually happen. I wanted it to happen this May, but I can see it's not going to be that way, is it? So we can go and make it happen next May would be wonderful. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
I think most of us, if not all of us, think that the goal is meritorious. No argument about or resistance even, about the aim of honoring our diversity, walking the walk. I had gotten an email from Howard Cohn, who's on the Recreation Committee, who asked me for my advice on it, and about what I thought this was about a month ago, the feasibility of doing something like this. And I sort of made 2 points. Was that one, I wanted the committee that was trying to plan this to try to minimize its reliance on the city and the Recreation Department for many of the reasons that you've heard about. But that, second of all, one of the things I said to him in an email is that what I don't understand is why is it that when organizations come up with a great idea, they first turn to the City of Tacoma Park for a blessing or given a sponsorship or credibility of the City of Tacoma Park. I said to him that why doesn't anybody ever think of corporate sponsorship? I mean, if you are going to pull together this body of ethnic Americans, whether they're citizens or not, from all these different nationalities, that is a group of, from a corporate point of view, of consumers who are very difficult to reach for corporate America because they're outside the bell curve of who most Americans seem to be, and how you get reach to them. And that there's a lot. We have many companies, large companies, that have offices or retail locations in here, or companies like Washington Gas and Verizon Wireless and others that, were just part of their map, but who might very well leap at the chance to be a corporate sponsor of such a unique and specialized event. Because there's not much, anything that comes to mind. It might be the Smithsonian Folk Festival, perhaps Adams Morgan event that could even come close to what we're talking about here. And I think that you could go after 2 or 3 or 4 of those companies and probably find it to be very easy money, which for you, $2,000-$3,000 sponsorship is a lot of money. But for them, it's not even going to blip on their radar in their corporate budgets. It's just something that's going to be there that they take the opportunity as they find them. And I think it would create a presence there, so that if I'm an immigrant person and all of a sudden there's a booth with Verizon Wireless or Pepco or Washington Gas on the premises of this festival, that gives that festival a certain cachet. Now, obviously, this is Tacoma Park, and we hate that the CVS moved in on Carroll Avenue, and we don't want to see the Subway here selling sandwiches when they should be buying their sandwiches from a mom and pop store instead of a franchise. So there's a natural antipathy that we have to big corporations and brand names and all of that, and I understand that. But on the other hand, this is a way to find money to achieve a larger goal that would be easy to get, probably. And I would, ideology that we could debate it, but it's something we don't see this anywhere, even in the Independence Day Committee or any of the festivals, and it might be something worth considering. Because frankly, I'm going to be very protective of the city's budget and the city's staffing. I mean, as you know, the rec department's already down 3 people, that we're recruiting for, and all of that. But it takes time for people to get on board and to learn their jobs. And I think it's tough enough to put together a budget when we know exactly what we have to do. But when we're still working in the realm of, the idea stage, a conceptual stage, or thinking out the size of what we want to do, it's very hard for anybody who needs to create a budget and give it to the 7 of us to vote up and down on, to do that. But yet you don't have time to waste. You need to get on with it. And you can hope that the city will support you. And I do want to encourage you, no question about that. But I think if you lean too much on the city, we're going to get in your way. And I see tremendous potential here. I just, maybe I'm giving you mixed messages. I don't mean to, but I just think that. You need to charge ahead, and if the city can figure out a way to help you, we'll probably figure out how to do that at some point.
Just a couple of quick points on that is that it's the challenge with volunteer groups is you try and strike while the energy's there. And so I think from the MLK Day, there was that energy of doing that, and so we started talking about doing something May of this year, and then after discussion with city staff, we realized this wasn't going to happen, so we decided we'll put it back another year, and we'll kind of plan things with that. Now, the partnership of the city staff came about because this is an ad hoc group. We can't raise funds for ourselves because we're not an independent 501c3 or an organization, so we didn't have that structure. So we thought, well, this would be a good partnership to do with the city, and our proposal was very much, okay, the budgets are tight, we appreciate that, so let's do this with a bigger emphasis on volunteer time and a lesser emphasis on city staffing time. And so I guess the challenge we would throw back to the city is you've got a group of people that are interested in pulling together diverse elements of the city. This is an idea we came up with. We would challenge you all to, if this isn't good, if you don't like it, help us figure out a better way to approach this. Help us figure out a better way to mobilize citizens from diverse elements of the city to get involved in this. This is the idea we came up with after MLK Day. It is the group that we kind of came up with and mobilized around that had some excitement in that. And I think it's kind of an amazing thing, and I understand cities operate on much longer terms. So we had to spend a lot of time wrapping our heads around, like, we got to think a year out? Oh, more than a year out? Okay, we'll do that. Well, now for a group of volunteers to say, well, it's not a year out. You really have to figure out even further back than that, I think is either unrealistic to charge a group of volunteers to do this. And so how do we do this partnership with city staff? And if it is, well, you want citizens to get involved in the process and you got to think 2 years in advance, I don't think that's going to happen. And so I guess I would ask all of you for advice, your counsel on, if you want to pull together citizen involvement and stuff like this, how do we do it? And how do we do it in partnership with the city or not?
And let me say something, sorry. Okay. What I've learned in my brief time here in Tacoma Park is a couple of things from you guys. Number one, the rec department and the rec committee are not just interested in sports. That was new to me. The rec department and the rec committee are interested in the life and culture of Tacoma Park. So if the life and culture of Tacoma Park fundamentally includes people of different colors and backgrounds and ethnicities and immigration statuses, it makes it's not a stretch at all. It makes complete sense that the rec department and rec committee would want to be involved in multiracial community building, right? So that's the topic. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about the rec department and rec committee. It's not, I'm just trying to help us refocus in on what the purpose is and what we all care about.
And I want to make sure people get a chance to speak, but I also want to make sure that we all get a chance to stretch, and that we give the city manager any direction that we care to give about what goes in the budget and not be here all night. But there's at least 4 lights that are still on. So go to Councilmember Snipper and then Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been clear to me for a long time that there's a very different vision here for the rec department and many members of the community. And it has to do with, it's exemplified by the budget, which focuses very heavily on purchasing services and items rather than working with the community to have the community do these kinds of things. And it has become clear to me that it's just, this is a, how would I say this? This is a paradigm difference. The world is just seen differently. And there's different goals, objectives, methods for getting from here to there, and it's perhaps unbridgeable. So I'm going to steal the mayor's suggestion. I understand it was your suggestion, to use a council-appointed committee. Perhaps change the charge of the rec committee or set up a separate one that we would charge for overseeing this kind of event that would make it a little bit apart from the city as a result of that. But the council would be charging the committee with goals as we were just discussing. Now, I do think there has to be some partnership with the city, just as many of the committees partner with the city, because this makes it possible to do things like deal with the money side of issues that you were talking about, make sure that we have a police presence, the trash gets picked up, similar kinds of stuff with Public Works if there, needs to be setup of things. So with that kind of a partnership approach, but with an official council-appointed committee, whether it's the rec committee or a separate one, still to be decided, I think we should put a budget amount in. I urge the city manager to do this. I know 10,000 has been bandied about, and that seems like a good starting amount to me. We might go up or down when we see how this goes, but that would be covering the city staff support for just this one World Festival kind of event. Now, having said all that, I still support my original idea of having the Recreation Department do a series of small events. And I've received a number of suggestions. I know you guys have worked on a gardening and planting day, an international dinner and dance event, a Walk Tacoma Passport event, which I thought was very clever, where you went to different parts of the city and got your passport stamped as a way of winning prizes, that kind of thing. There's already some events. There's an Ethiopian event coming up in June that could be worked into this. There's lots of other events. We have food and farming things that were talked about earlier, all kinds of fora we could have. But these smaller, as I envision them, smaller events that would be heavily, would use volunteers heavily and would just use a small amount of city staff, are a way of seeing how this kind of event would play out and whether we should move forward with it. It's kind of like an experiment. And if you do it with a small amount of staff and money, then if it turns out to be a flop, you haven't spent a lot. I have one final comment about corporate sponsorships, because I think this is a very interesting idea, but it has a serious downside in Tacoma Park, which is that quite a few people in Tacoma Park that I've talked to can't really think of any corporations they'd like to partner with. Perhaps that's because, they think of Walmart when you say corporations, and it's like, gag, not Walmart. And, some people who have Comcast service would say, oh, my God, Comcast. So it would be, maybe there's a green corporation that people in Tacoma Park might feel some comfort with, but it seems to me that would be a big hurdle to find an appropriate sponsor that Tacoma Parkians would be comfortable with. And I'll stop there.
Councilmember Mayo.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First, it may be that some council members aren't aware, but I can think of 3 World Festivals that already happen in Tacoma Park. The first is the International Dinner at Piney Branch Elementary School, which at last, when I went to it this year, had 200 to 300 people. Kids dressed in the clothing of their countries, kids and parents bringing in food, music, performances, poetry. It's a great event. Same thing happens at Rolling Terrace Elementary School, 100 to 200 kids. If they don't have a country, they're all given a country, or they choose a country. It could be the country they come from or a different country. Also, I guess this is not strictly speaking Tacoma Park, but Tacoma Park Girl Scouts participate in another international festival that happens at the Silver Spring International Middle School. And also, multicultural event. I bring those up because I like the many elements of this proposal, and I like the community focus that you all have brought to it, the locally driven content, which I think is crucial. But I bring up those other examples because I think we would be better off saying, let's set aside $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 in the budget, and then ask for proposals from the community for what the community wants. So maybe the international community, the multicultural aspects of Tacoma Park, the people with this or other visions of Tacoma Park, this is all what they would agree they want to do. But maybe they would have other ideas. And I think rather than somewhat paternally saying, the space you've been given is to have a festival, go forth and produce a festival, say, we've got this budget, now let's see what comes in. I think this is, as I said, a great idea, and it could be that this is the top idea. It could be that it's this idea, and, for example, the Folk Festival decides that they, as an NGO, would be happy to partner with this set of volunteers in the community and have the Folk Festival receiving some money from the city be able to provide the various sort of official coverage that we were just talking about, insurance and other things. Maybe that's the way it works. Maybe businesses in Tacoma Park decide they want to partner with it, and you get some other cool synergy that happens. But then at least we're opening it up to the community and really letting stuff come in. But I'm perfectly happy to say we put some budget in here for this issue. But I would just ask us to bring in ideas from the community. I think about how much time we anguished over the $7,500 to $8,000 of small grants that we made, and how much good we believe all those little grants could do. And so I just don't want to throw out the idea that a bunch of smaller projects that might each attract 100, 200, 300 people might not be a better way to get to build momentum around this issue. Again, I like the ideas and the way you all wrote them up. And I accept that if we did a festival like this, the staff costs that the city has come up with are probably realistic. So, we're talking about, if it's a city festival, $10,000, minimum for the city's costs. Anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
I believe Mr. Grimes is next.
If you want to cede your spot. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Siemens. So I feel a bit like we all in the council are Dr. Frankenstein. We've sort of created this monster, but we've created it from parts and components that came from elsewhere. I'm not saying that you're criminal brains or anything like that, but anyway. So to review history that we've heard tonight already, there was a successful multicultural event on Martin Luther King birthday that was associated with a service day, as Ms. Jaquette Frazier pointed out to us during the public comments. And we, the council, encouraged the group who produced the Martin Luther King Day events, including the persons who are before us now, to develop what they had done into a series of festivals. I will say I'm aware of some of the other events that Councilmember Mayle mentioned. My own kids at school have participated in them. So we encourage this. Personally, I've said this at the council before in my short tenure here, I'm very much in favor of community partnerships with volunteers who put their own labor into developing things in partnership with the city, and that's not always just about money. It's about helping further the city's own aims, and I think that what we're discussing here is very much in furtherance of the city's own aims. So we have people who jumped into the breach and are doing what the council, I believe, would like individuals in the community to do, according to a model that I believe the other council members, in addition to myself, wish to support, which is community partnerships. I'll note some things that haven't come up yet. I got to go take recourse to my email once again. One thing is that the city will have, in a matter of just a couple of weeks, joining its staff, a person who is experienced in putting on the Tacoma Park Street Festival, the very Tacoma Park environment that we're working in, someone who has recruited corporate sponsors for the Street Festival, as well as participants of all different stripes. That would include vendors and performers and so on. That is, of course, Roz Grigsby. If she were here, she'd be casting dirty looks at me, but she's not here, so I can go ahead and say this.
That's all right. The city manager is casting those.
I'm actually thinking of Sarah Danes casting the look.
Well, I'm sure that Sarah already has a work plan out for Roz that did not include these things, but anyway. And then I did a little research prior to this meeting. As some of you may know, IRS tax-exempt 501c3 organizations must publish a form called the 990 every year that lists their expenditures and so on. So I looked at the last available year for the Tacoma Park Folk Festival in light of what's in the city's budget here. For the last reporting year they had, their expenditures were $35,409. Of that, $12,587 were site rental, which is a very substantial part of what they spent. and $5,947 was advertising expense. We're talking about a community festival here where the advertising would be largely through community networks and so on. And just based on the Tacoma Park Folk Festival, a festival of their scope and size, which is much larger in terms of the number of participants and the origin of the participants from outside Tacoma Park, nationally in fact, they put something on for approximately $18,000. I think that's a very good substantiation of the budget level that was presented by the individuals who are here before us now for the festival that they had proposed as they had envisioned it. So I guess I'm seeing every indication that we can and should. We created this, and we should live through what we've created. We can and should go forward with this. The figure Councilmember Snipper put forward was $10,000. I don't know, that sounds reasonable to me, and it's in line with the budget that was put here before us. The actual planning for this, keeping in mind what the city manager had to say about needing to give staff their work plans, but also keeping in mind that we do have an active group of volunteers here who would be providing the majority of the labor, and I believe them. I think that the actual planning of this can be deferred a little bit, but the commitment to going forward with this and providing a level of funding that's needed should not be. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Oh, it's my turn?
All right. This is going on probably longer than it needs to, but I would just like to make clear that what I think the goal should be, and I think what we need, is a community-wide event that includes a cross-section of the cultures of the city involved in the planning, the participants, and the attendees. And I think it's something that we don't have right now in any event here in the city, and I think that would be the goal that I would like to see that we meet. I think what I've heard tonight is that the structure of something like the Independence Day Committee or the Folk Festival would be a way to do that for this first year. And what that means is that the group of volunteers would probably have to partner with someone who is incorporated or would have to incorporate. We could possibly, if we, if this council gives direction to the Recreation Committee or sets up a new committee, that would be the way to do it, and I would have to defer to the city manager on whether that would be a way of handling that, and that may not be something for you to answer. It may require some legal advice on that.
Are you asking Councilmember Siemens as to how the funding could be channeled? I'm not...
Yeah, I'm saying that if it was a council-appointed committee that was given direction to organize this event, okay, with assistance from the staff, but primarily for the day of the event is the primary assistance they would be getting from the staff. Would we then be covered by city insurance?
I would probably check actually with the insurance company, because ultimately they're the ones who would have to make that determination.
And then it would also be the group who would be contracting with the vendors and other contractors.
I think you have two choices in terms of contracting. You cannot, I don't believe by the city code you could delegate contractual authority on behalf of the city to volunteers. Actually, I'm the contract signatory for everything at the city. Once you get into the city realm of the city executing certain contracts, what goes with that is certain procurement procedures.
Right, I understand. Rather than get that all solved tonight, I would just like to say that we set this goal, we say we want this to happen, we still have to iron out the mechanisms for whether it's going to be a partnering with another existing organization, your group incorporating as a nonprofit to do it, or doing it through an appointment of the city council. by doing it that way, we can later worry about getting the work orders developed for employees for the follow-on year. But the first year would be primarily a volunteer-driven function with the city staff providing the day of the event, some planning throughout the process, but that would be at the probably at a managerial level rather than at a union employee level. And then funding that we include in our budget, funding for the staff support for the day of the event, and we include some money, as we do for some of the other city festivals, for the group to use, and it would have to be obviously with meeting the procurement restrictions and the reporting restrictions, receipts and things like that. And so I would like to propose that we provide a budget of $30,000 for this year, which includes the staff time and money for the group and the group to be TBD, but it doesn't have to be determined before the completion of the budget. So I'd like to make that as a motion.
Second.
Ooh, knocked me over with the amount. He said 30,000. I was ready for
That includes the staff time,
Well, yeah.
which is the police, the public works.
Right, that's at least
right?
10,000, yeah. It's
Yeah,
gonna be at
and
least
so
10,000.
I would say that it's better to ask the city manager to put some money in the budget. And I was going to say...
That's a policy decision, Mayor, with all due respect.
Yeah,
That is a policy decision.
No, but what I'm not clear on tonight is with as vague a direction as this is, to determine what the level of staff overtime is for something like that, and the appropriate amount for the other incidentals. I was thinking, 10,000 would cover you all. We're saying 7,500, and staff overtime is a couple thousand, and that covers it.
No, I would say, I think the staff overtime figure, based on what's been described in our experience with other festivals, I think is fairly well defined. I think that's about $10,000 between Public Works and Police. I think to me, that doesn't really require any discussion. I think that is our figure based on our own experience. I think the issue beyond that is you fund some of the other primary festivals in the community to varying levels, and I think it's a matter of how much does the council want to allocate for this purpose.
And the other funding's used for basically entertainment and the facilities, which includes now the tents and canopies and things like that that Greg had in his budget.
So that I'm going on memory here, but...
That's shaky.
Yeah, but it's all I got. The staff overtime is something that we do for the various festivals, but we don't break that out in terms of the budget. We don't say, this is the amount that we give them. And we give the folk festival on the order of 7,000 or 8,000, and we give the Independence Day Committee 11.
Which you decided to do, contingent obviously on your final execution of the budget for FY13, was $7,000 for the Folk Festival, and I believe it was $13,500 for the Independence Day Committee. In regard, Mayor, to the overtime for these festivals, it's not broken out in what you see, but it is part of what's factored into the department heads' calculations of their cost for the coming year.
Right. But all I'm trying to do is kind of play apples and apples here, and say, okay, it's the overtime, and it's some amount of money for the other stuff, but when you say 30,000, and then you compare to the other ones where the only thing that's broken out is the 13,000 or the 7,000, it looks like a huge amount.
Right, it does.
And it's still bigger than any of the other ones that have a track record, and I would not support a total of 30,000.
Well, we're open to a friendly amendment. What's your...
I would support the overtime and 8.
Let's hear from Mr. Schultz.
Does that mean,
First of all, you don't need to become a 501c anything to do what you want to do. All you have to do is just be incorporated as a nonprofit organization in the state of Maryland or anywhere else you choose to be incorporated, California for all that matters. And the costs of that, by the way, are nominal, and the time commitment takes you a couple weeks to get it done. So take heart from that. In other words, because if you're taking city money, city doesn't need you to be a 501c3. Am I mistaken? But corporations certainly don't care because they're going to write it off. Anyway. So I would be supportive of maybe 8,000, like the mayor said, suggested, because then at least you know you've got something to work with, and then you guys can get rolling, and if it works out and you need the money, we'll have it, we'll spend it. If it doesn't work out, you can't make it all come together, all the money won't get spent, and we can roll it over for some other kind of event.
Okay, I'll
you
accept that
might come
friendly
up with.
Mr. Snipper, would you second that?
Yeah.
$8,000?
Yeah, the 18 together is what it is. 10 for the staff and 8 for...
No, I didn't say 10 for 8. I said 8.
Yeah, 8.
Yeah, but it's still 10.
Plus 10 for the staff.
It's
plus
10
8.
for the staff, it's just, that's a real number.
10 for the overtime.
We're
plus
dropping the staff cost because that's already covered.
Yeah, it's already kind of rolled in, but I want, it needs to be accounted for somewhere. It'll show up in the budget somewhere.
Yeah.
It would show up in the overtime line item for each of the individual departments.
Yeah, because we're so early in the budget process. In fact, we hadn't even started the budget process.
This is just,
so we're sitting there allocating funds that, we haven't decided whether we're going to raise the property tax rate yet. We won't decide that for 2 more months. So, let's keep the numbers small.
oh, but we wanted to front-load the budget process.
Oh, right.
And I would ask my colleagues to remember that I had not only the dollar amount in there, which attracted a lot of attention, but also a goal.
Yes.
Which was part of the motion.
We're all in favor of the goal. Right?
Yes.
No.
Are we happy with...
No.
Numbers.
I mean, I think you indicate an interest in the city in having multicultural events, and you ask people to submit ideas. In particular, I would prefer that we actually ask for partnerships where they can come in and they can run the thing themselves, and then we could actually get something done in the next few months instead of having to depend on city hiring.
That's always been the intention.
And so, I'd much rather solicit a package deal that comes in from the community, or 1 or 2 things. And if in future years we could have a city festival that has a lot more city involvement, then great. But I'd rather get going on it and take that approach and have a call for proposals rather than take what you got, go back, find a partner that can work with you to get the stuff done, and do it that way instead of...
Yeah, I like his idea that you solicit, because we're just a bunch of white guys sitting up here trying to make decisions about a world ethnic festival, and we really shouldn't be making those decisions. Those should be coming from the community itself.
You're a guy.
I'm not a guy.
Yes, you are. That was poetic license.
So, I heard you saying, but we are already...
The committee is pretty diverse. Obviously we want more, and we've been getting more input, but the folks that put together MLK, we had some good diversity there.
Not just good diversity.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Very excellent.
It
can always be better, but we're incorporating Pat Rumbaugh to get her input on stuff, and she's got some diverse elements in her group. So it is reaching out, and I think, as Tim said, the idea is really to kind of farm this out among the community and get people to kind of put in bids for what they want to do and get it as diverse as we can.
Sounds
Mr.
admirable.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, lead us through. Help.
Save us.
It sounds like the right direction. It sounds like there's consensus to direct the city manager to put some money in the budget to be continued.
That's
You
it?
don't get to vote?
To be
You don't get to
continued?
vote?
That's not a vote. Can't we say, can't we agree that?
We're not putting money in the budget now. We're just saying,
Terry made a motion, and Ruben seconded it.
okay, well then, we'll vote on it. I don't care.
What was the motion? Please restate.
The motion was that we would
With his goals.
strive to have a community event that includes a cross-section of our cultural characteristics of our residents in the planning, participation, and attendance
And there was a
of the event. And it was for $8,000 plus the staff overtime necessary for the day of the event.
And does it have to be the 2013 budget, or could we use the 20...
The opportunity will come when we talk about the budget. All we're doing is directing the city manager to put some in there in her proposed budget.
And I'm assuming that in 2012, we'll end up with some unexpended funds. Is there a reason we wouldn't use an amendment to the 2012 budget to put money aside as opposed to putting it in 2013?
And that's a great point, particularly because the rec department has been understaffed, so therefore one would assume money has been saved out of recreation-type opportunities.
I don't think that's how things work.
But we passed an amendment just a few weeks ago to the 2012 budget. We can do so
You're
then.
talking about setting up essentially a reserve fund out of, that you should answer that.
Well, you're talking about...
I think you're talking about a festival that would happen in FY13, and the appropriate place to budget it would be in FY13. All that would happen now is if you do an amendment and the funding is not actually expended, is the funding would lapse as of June 30th. So it'd just be, and it wouldn't serve any constructive purpose, in my opinion. I would just put it in the FY13 budget.
So you are only ready to do this in 2013? Not any sooner?
You're talking about FY.
FY, starting July 1.
July 1, yeah.
Right.
Started July 1 of this year.
Of this year.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't do it until,
After July 1.
About a year from now.
yeah, a year from
I think
now.
it's Saturday, June 1st is the...
We initially talked about doing it in FY 2012, and we were told, not a chance.
So, okay, all those in favor of the motion? Okay,
It was unanimous.
we knew that.
So we're going to take a break now?
I think
It
you,
clearly said that there was festivals and other festivals. That's what it said, that's why I came here. Now, are you going to address that after the break?
other one-day events in the city.
Other one day, that's why I'm here, another one-day event. I'm not asking for much.
Oh, okay, okay. Come, say something about other one-day event.
Oh, no, this is
You
optional.
have to leave the audience. Well, you get a break, and nobody wants to stay here longer, it's too late. This is a small festival, just another festival, oh my gosh.
Oh, give us your name.
Kyle Greenlee, Ward 2, I believe.
One.
You're at Ward 1.
Oh, gosh.
Carroll Avenue.
Anyway, this is another festival, and it's a music festival, and we're not asking for anything from the city. What I was hoping for was, what's the policy of the city on events? I've got a lot of sort of general feeling about it, and this thing may grow. The thing with the festival is sometimes they're small, sometimes they die, sometimes they get big. But looking forward, since I used to make a living years ago with a festival that I did in a city, renting property and buying my own insurance, and did that for 5 years, I have a little bit of experience with this. And it's a jam band festival, and I'd like to start it really small, and we'll see how it goes. But now that I know that the Recreation Department's interested, we've gone from the concrete of the sidewalks to the ephemerality of a one-day event, and I'm looking for a half-a-day event the first time. So is the city, one of the things that makes this city great is things like this, these festivals that go on. So I would ask if the council has any policy on festivals in general, and are we going to go forward and indeed foment more and interesting events? And the event I'm thinking of doing, we'll probably do grassroots completely at first. But if we start to get bigger and then we want to close a street to do it, then I guess we'll come to you and say, hey, can we do this? And
Yeah, I
I'm
would
not
just-
looking to spend any of the taxpayers' money on any of this.
And the World Festival Group was talking about putting on some kind of event every month, and there's the potential to talk to them and say, well, gee, I have an idea for a month, and
So we'll maybe go under their wing, but we've got a date picked, and that is September 22nd with a rain date of the 23rd, sort of dovetailing between all the other things that are going on. And I guess I'll talk to Recreation later and see if, this conflicts. And
also talk with Jay Keller.
Who's the chair of the
Who's the chair of the
Recreation
Recreation Committee, and if you have anything I can help you with, let me know.
Yeah, you guys have, paved the way for us right in front of our house. So thank you very much, and if
Just one thing is that if you want to close a city street, the police department is usually pretty amenable to that. You have to give them a certain number of days' notice.
it's a state highway, though.
Then you talk to the mayor.
That's a wonderful
Never mind.
Oops.
Oops. Well, thank you very much, and I don't know how you stay awake.
I know. It's talking about sidewalks for hours and hours.
We have 3 additional items on the work session,
Well,
which were postponed from another time when we didn't get to them. But
Play Day in September.
my sense is that people do not want to take those up this evening. Is that correct? Anybody who wants to keep going, speak now or forever hold your
I think we
peace.
can go to 12 midnight.
Yeah, I think you're a minority of one. So I think we will, is there something that we need to do?
Well, the one thing, I wondered if it may, well, council may be able to let us know if there's a chance of getting through the council procedures sort of quickly, depending on, no? It's your call, but...
Do people have changes that they want to discuss on that?
I've read them and I have no changes, so...
I have no
I'd be happy to
changes.
Do it now.
Anyone have changes, suggestions?
I've no changes. I could come up with some, though.
No, we don't want them.
No.
So
moved.
So
I
maybe we
could
could
send
maybe we
them
could
to
do
the
this.
city attorney for
Well, that's just a work
review.
session. It doesn't
Oh, we
require...
can't move? All right.
We're not voting on anything.
Send us
Send
Send them to the city attorney, and you're
Yeah.
comfortable with where it went.
Right.
Yes.
Great work.
We just did.
Okay, so we did, item number 3 is follow-up discussion, council procedures discussion. Anybody have any changes, send them to the city clerk. But it sounds like nobody does. She's going to send it to the city attorney for drafting.
Yes.
Okay, good. Now we've got direction on that one. That one's off the list. Any other reason to sit here any longer?
We'll talk about the recognition and honoring members.
We will do that.
We promise.
I wanted that. That's my agenda item.
Okay. Can we
We keep trying.
Can we maybe get other cities like Greenbelt and see, I Googled this one, and either I didn't ask the right question, but the machine gave me some strange answers. So, but even Greenbelt, Rockville, Gaithersburg, to see what they do, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. We're adjourned.
Love it.
Thanks, Larry. You said that.
He was doing a Pat Loveless.
Best imitation.
We just thought he wasn't here tonight. Do you need a ride?
Can I get a ride for that?
Oh, man, I can't put it in my car.